is this an example of evolution in a larger scale using us in a way that makes us think that we're the executors, but really it's the larger evolution at play in the sense of it would have been, any other corporation. Wayland Corp just happened to be the one that made it.
The thing that,
and that's why I think that's why they have the Utani as like the one that loses. It's like it would have been them. It would have been somebody else.
It could have been the other one. Yeah. And then of course they were absorbed into each other. So
right. Yeah.
The thing that struck me as so compelling about Prometheus, and then God, what was the next one called?
Covenant.
Covenant. That's right.
Yeah.
Was that it reveals that humans basically not just basically, we really just stumbled upon like some galactic Swiss Army knife, and we don't even know how to open it.
Right.
And that's like,
well, yeah, and I think that's part of why we keep having these stories concerning the. I just revisited the Vedic epochs. And how we're in like the Kali Yuga, where it kind of makes sense in terms of explaining how things are the way they are concerning if we have stories about beings that lived for what seem to be eternities, but really are like 100,000 years or 500,000 year beings, because they were existing at a different time when existence is mostly serenity and hardly any of it is suffering. And this notion of now we're living in a time when most existence is suffering and we get hardly any serenity, so that's why we barely live to 100 years. And that's why our cycle is 100 years. It's not because of our inability to live for 100,000 years. It's that we're in a cycle that prevents us from actually achieving those 100,000 year lifespans. It's not that it's impossible. Because this is, to me, I always wondered about in the stories of when they're talking about, the descendants of Adam living to 900 years and 800 years and Methuselah. I'm like, are they counting years differently? Obviously they're counting years differently, but at the same time, is it impossible? Because we have periods in time where Brontosaurus and Tyrannosaurus Rex lived, and those were fucking gigantic beings. And I think in a way, what is it? It's like alligators, I believe. They keep growing and they don't necessarily die unless it's an external factor. There's some animals.
Alligators are like super long lived.
Right.
They only die when the electrical signal in their nervous system fails to resolve.
Right. Yeah. It's not even necessarily to do with their age.
I think sea turtles are the same way.
Yeah. Exactly. There's some species.
They're all really ancient animals.
Yeah.
And I think
and their life cycles aren't the way we expect them to. They just keep getting bigger.
We learned recently through gravitational wave analysis that the universe isn't expanding the way that we thought it was.
Right.
And that it's not as old as we thought it was, but it's accelerating. The way it's accelerating is continuing to accelerate.
Yes.
And so, in a sense, these beings that have been around since the dawn of existence, those early years weren't, well, we have to calculate them differently. Mm-hmm. And our math is continually off because we are gaining greater accuracy, discrete accuracy within our frameworks and within and just the math itself is delivering greater accuracy, granular accuracy. Yeah. And so now when we realize, we have to adjust this time scale. Mm-hmm. We have to, because, we can't even appreciate our own solar system on the time scale of a human lifespan. So
yeah. Well, I think that's part of the problem is people want to have things happen or occur in human life cycle spans. When even something like Notre Dame would have taken multiple life cycles.
Oh yeah, well there were it was over 100 years to build, and then the forest. That forest is still around. Mm-hmm. That forest they built it from.
Yeah, but the trees aren't big enough.
That's true.
To get the spires tight anymore.
Wow.
And this is what's funny about it is now after that the building burned and the discussion of by the French people of what to do with the building, none of it has to do with making it exactly the same way, and it's all about making it more sustainable and using it to make a message. which to me, it's very funny how the initial public reaction was outrage about preserving something historical, and then when they're going to rebuild it, they're not trying to preserve the historical aspects at all, in the sense of, you can't build the spire in the same way anymore because of the trees, and then
also,
they're talking
the
about
techniques are probably, very difficult to execute.
I mean, they had a beehive installed on the roof in the first place, so it wasn't like they were trying to make it 100% like it was 500 years ago in the first place. So,
my understanding is that the bees didn't even get touched. Like,
and this wasn't the first time that there's been destruction to it.
Yeah.
And then when they rebuilt it, they changed the buttresses or something. Because I remember learning about the concept of flying buttresses around because of Notre Dame, and they had done something different because the buttresses weren't flying the first time.
Well, they weren't strong enough or something.
Right. Yeah. And so because that's why they had to make flying buttresses.
Yeah, they had to reinforce the structure continually. I think this is a really good opportunity for science to deliver the artificial carbon fiber structure that a tree would normally provide.
Right.
We're really lucky. We live on a planet where we have plants that produce fibers that are essentially carbon fiber, and they are strong as can be. Like, there are buildings made out of wood that are over 100 years old. In China, there are buildings made of wood that are like 1,000 years old. So there's something to that structure, that biological structure. It's actually quite incredible now that I really think about it.
It'd be amazing if you could build a house out of living wood that took form, but also was able to change its form over time on its own. Do it in a functional manner. Like
wood that you could encode to grow into
smart wood,
into like a 2x4 or become a 4x4 over time because you needed to become stronger.
Yeah, but in the sense of, because it's actually attached to a rooted tree that's also got memory, then it would be growing into a room or something, or
that'd be awesome.
A sauna, or have a sense of, this person uses this space in such a way.
Oh man,
let me replicate myself as I grow.
This is like the tree house from.
That's what I'm saying.
From some anime.
Like, it's like a magic tree house, but with science.
Yeah. And then to communicate, you just put a communication disc on it to tap into the tree's electrical grid.
Right.
And then you give it an address somehow, and then a viewing screen opens up at your buddies in their communication wall inside the tree. And we know that mycelial network can communicate over extremely vast distances, so it's not unreasonable to be able to tap into some kind of organic electrical network. I mean, it might require
maybe fungus would be better since it grows so fast too. I mean, this was just obviously just a concept, but even then it's they've been adapting these networks to do lights and illuminate pathways. So
with bioluminescence too, which is even crazier, because then they're converting energy stored in the ground into light. Cold energy.
Yeah, we've been extremely inefficient about how we've been using the potential energy and kinetic energy around this, and I think it's everyone always harkens back to Tesla and how it was everything he was attempting to do wasn't necessarily about quote unquote free energy, but about efficiency and effectiveness, but then it was all co-opted to be monetized and tracked and capitalized, in the sense of the notion of individuals producing electricity is something that is still kind of fringe. It's not really mainstream. It's in the mainstream, but it's still a fringe idea within the mainstream.
But even as a fringe idea within the mainstream, it's still kind of relegated to, you have to be a property owner to be able to take advantage of solar programs.
Exactly.
Or you have to own a lot of land, huge property, and then you might be able to qualify for a windmill, like a real windmill, not just like, I erected a windmill and I can generate 5
Right.
kilowatts of power, and that's enough to run, the most basic version of my home. I'm not interested in that. I need a solar array producing upwards of, like 10 kilowatts just to run my house.
And I'm surprised that the windmill shape, in the sense of, it seems to be, surely there's a way to get more utility of 360 degree airflow, in the sense of it could be a square or a cube based foundation that has fans on each corner, so it's got whatever corner the wind hits it, then it'll start turning a fan. But then if that cube also turns, then it'll still get the most.
In California,
effective.
they have these. From a distance, they look like a football.
Yeah. I've seen
and
those.
they're helically shaped,
Yeah,
and so they spin from every direction of wind. But I feel like they have to be on top of a ridge or a hill or something to work.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, I see from my memory of driving through California as a child, I remember seeing mostly like more traditionally shaped ones. But along the ridge lines, you would see these football things, and they would always spin. There was nothing; they would never stop spinning.
Yeah, because I always see, whenever I'm driving through northern Indiana, you'll see some of the fans or some of the windmills spinning, but then a couple rows won't be spinning, and it's not because they're not functioning at the time or something. It's just they're not getting. There shouldn't be a time when some of the fans or some of the mills are spinning and the other ones aren't. It's clearly there's a flaw in the design somewhere. And somebody, in the sense of, they designed, well, it's not like they've been putting a lot of money and time into advancing sustainable resources. These things have been underfunded concerning their development, specifically. So as far as when people assert that they, scientists have, no, they haven't been funded well to design these things specifically. So it becomes a chicken and egg situation. Because then this is why we've been stuck perpetually in the oil-based paradigm, which is, I think it's funny how much Elon Musk gets. He's in the mainstream now, but people have forgotten how much the government made it difficult for him to sell his cars at first. I think it was straight illegal in New Jersey.
Oh yeah,
for them to sell, for dealerships to sell Teslas for a couple years, because
the dealerships passed legislation requiring all cars to be serviced by a dealership.
Right.
So there was this incredible loophole pit that they couldn't get in or out of because they had to establish dealerships to sell them. But New Jersey changed the laws, I think, so that if there's a dealership, then there has to be a used car market available, so they can open up the dealership market to allow for various vendors to gain access to the repair market. It's a really backwards way. And so essentially, by being greedy, New Jersey missed out on having Teslas. That's a huge car market, because everyone in New Jersey commutes to Pennsylvania or New York.
Right. Yeah.
And so, oh man,
what's the perfect market for Teslas?
Yeah, because the round trip's only 120 miles max.
Yeah.
Max.
Man.
And so, huge.
But then again, because of that range, you can actually set up in Pennsylvania and still hit the Jersey market pretty well. That is, I mean, not to say that that's good, but it could be worse.
Well, I mean, it's good for Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's good for Pennsylvania. And then these are the things that make you wonder how much of that is intentionally done to make it so that the individual states have their benefit and one is not benefiting. Because this is, to me, if we have a federal government and you have this thing that's going on with Alabama and Texas and Missouri
and
Georgia. Why do we even have a federal government at this point? If we have states that are able to overturn effectively Roe versus Wade, why even have Roe versus Wade? And not to say that I want to get, of course I want to keep that, but my problem is if we have this federal government that's taking out fucking taxes, not sustaining the roads anymore, they're not sustaining the federal highways, that shit's falling apart. They're not protecting people's rights.
The shit part about the interstates is that they have to be compliant with federal regulations, and so so here's the funny part. So if a region changes its requirements, or if the federal government decides to change its requirements and the state's not able to update the roads in time, they miss out on considerable amounts of federal subsidies for those contracts. And then, so let's see, it gets even weirder, because once you start losing that money, then the traffic starts to go away, because you know, no one wants to drive, those roads are not being maintained, and then the industry through those states will start to suffer. I think that with the idea that Actually, I think the idea that the states can challenge the federal mandate is a good thing. We need to have that kind of ability to say, hey, wait a second, slow your roll, guys. We tell you, not the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, the checks and balances system has to be maintained so that it's when something comes up that challenges something that threatens several civil liberties all at once, then we need to be able to. I think the problem is that we have a system that enables gridlock.
Yeah.
We not just enable it, but we seem to have politicians.
Rewards it.
They're being rewarded by initiating gridlock in the political system, in the legislative system, and it's just.
I mean, it's why we've been discussing the same issues since before we were born.
Yeah.
It's the exact same issue since before we were born. It has not changed.
So in that case, how do we resolve the gridlock?
It's old people. It's fucking old people. There's no way around it, man. There's no way around it. We can't avoid it anymore.
Yeah.
There's no reason that somebody who's fucking 7 years old should be in the lead of this country.
Well, I don't think that
there's no reason.
I don't think that anybody who sits at any kind of high table away, up in the clouds has any idea what the ground looks like anymore. Especially that they've been there long enough that that's home.
The fucking worker age of retirement is 65. Why are people in Congress? That's like probably the average age. I don't know off the top of my head what the average age is, but I would guess it's probably some shit like 65. No, the average age of people in Congress should be 35, 40. It shouldn't be 65, 70. We shouldn't have people dying in Congress. And that's,
Whoa.
Yeah, see, I probably was being conservative.
57 years of age for senators.
Senators?
Yeah. 57.
Damn.
So they're like, getting close to retirement. But, that's thrown off by people like Miss Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
And
she's an outlier.
Yeah.
They probably did not. They probably didn't remove the outliers in there.
Of course they don't. That helps. That helps the statistics to have a little bit of young blood. It really, just a little bit. I mean, you remember how the bell curve got thrown off by that one person in class? How that one person just makes everything just shift, and it's like, what?
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I always wanted to be that person because I hated when if nobody got 100, I always felt as if that meant the professor did something wrong. So then, at the same time, it's not that I didn't think any professor was incapable of being wrong. It's more so, most of the time, it was the kids not putting in the effort.
That's what I mean. It's like that person who could have turned in, a B, or maybe a C if they had just tried a little bit harder. But they would get that D, or they put the D effort in, and then next thing you know, your group is just like, what? I could have done that myself.
Oh, I thought you were talking about on the upper chart. I'm sorry,
I'm talking about the other end of the curve where like the.
Well, because sometimes they will offer extra credit, and then you get like 106, 110.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there would be one person who got the 110, and then maybe 2 100s, and then the rest, you know.
Yeah, but that's when it's beneficial.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of the opposite side. It was just funny because it's like, yeah,
Well,
then this other side, the person got the 39%.
Yeah.
Like, do they even know English? But yeah, it wasn't that they were. It was never the foreign person. It was like,
no, because they can speak 2 languages.
Right? Yeah.
They're the person that is, they're getting asked for help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, it's English is a complex language when there are like 700 and 800 level classes to help people fully understand what somebody was saying in, like, I don't know, old Germanic before it became Old English. And then giant books just analyzing 30 pages of 30 modern pages of text, because that 30 modern pages was probably hundreds of pages of handwritten calligraphy at one point.
Well, it's interesting to see.
You got to study literature to get to those places, though.
Yeah.
Like, no one preserved the newspaper from, well, some people did, but people were preserving literature. Not really. They weren't really preserving like magazines or the tabloids as much.
Yeah.
I mean, we get lucky. Sometimes we get some like cave graffiti, or we uncover paintings on a structure that was covered by volcanic ash, and that were turned into where the fresco was super preserved or something. But I mean, really.
I mean, I think part of it is the only reason we feel there's a need to quote unquote preserve the daily occurrences is because we've had so many resets that we've seen retrospectively. But I think before those resets would have happened, there would have been no logical reason to record day-to-day events as important, in the sense of newspapers were originally for tracking shipments and when they were arriving at the ports.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to be relevant information,
it's
not just
interesting that you say that, because I remember my mom talking about Newsport, which is the original newsprint.
That's funny.
And they were delivered at port.
Yeah.
And it was the news for the port.
Yep.
And it's a really, really...
That's the whole reason.
It's an ancient reference to the newspaper.
But then, we have accepted tabloid-style newspaper as normal because we grew up with it, and our parents grew up with it, and our grandparents existed with it. Exactly. So it was pretty much our grandparents' generation when it started happening in the tabloid style. And the problem with tabloid style that people have not really grasped is that when you put information next to each other that is unrelated, of varying degrees of importance slash impact, it devalues all of it in a way that not only desensitizes people to what's happening, it makes it so that it is almost not real. It's only real if you know the person in the news story personally, and then when you know the person in the news story personally,
it's rarely good.
Well, it's not even about what happens so much as the novelty of knowing someone that's in the news story being printed usurps whatever the story's even about. So then you're like, oh, I know this person. And it doesn't even matter if it's good or bad. The notion that you know the person in the news story is what's the most important thing about it. It's all about news is because so
the reason that I said that it's usually bad is because I grew up in Bloomington, and the local paper would often, the times that I would see names, it's like,
police
it's the police beat,
yeah.
or I mean, I went to elementary, middle school, and a year of high school with somebody who disappeared, who was part of a missing persons investigation at one point. And so that's an odd experience to see someone's name in the paper repeatedly that you knew, and it's part of an ongoing investigation, and it's not because they're a criminal. And then also, police beat. Like I went to middle school with 4 guys who, after high school, robbed a bank. I mean,
Jesus.
like, not just robbed a bank, but robbed a bank, and their getaway car was some, like, well-known muscle car that was, like, part of the local cruising classic circuit.
Of course.
And then somehow convinced one of their moms to go buy them, like, a Grand Cherokee with cash.
God. I'm sure they concocted that scheme after watching a movie.
And then like they apprehended one of them, and I guess he folded on the rest of them.
Man,
like that's
the way it always goes.
It didn't happen like it goes down in the movies. They didn't ride off to Mexico or Canada and get away.
Somebody always rats. Somebody always rats. In the end, that's the common thread in all of these stories in real life. Turns out
there really is no honor among thieves.
Of course not.
That's why that saying exists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is why Han Solo is such a weird character. Because, like, I mean, he reveals himself to... I mean, he's a great anti-hero, and he reveals that he's not really a thief. He just doesn't like playing by anyone else's rules. And
well, I thought that...
And in Solo, they kind of... They reveal that he understands you have to shoot first.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, they
establish
why.
Why
I think they did a decent job with that story, but there were some things about it that, because it was a Disney film, they didn't go far enough, and I think that's why people hated it. This gets back to what I'm saying about...
I think as far as new Disney princes go, Solo is a good Disney prince story.
Yeah.
And as far as... So is Spider-Man, though. The new Spider-Man.
Yeah.
He's also a good Disney prince.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm glad they got rid of the Uncle Ben shit. It's tired.
Oh, man. Yeah, you know...
I'm tired. It's tired. It's like, we don't need to see the fucking Batman's parents getting killed anymore. We don't need to see Uncle Ben die anymore.
We don't need to see, like, Obi-Wan get, like, slain. We don't need to see Qui-Gon get killed.
Yeah, those stories are done.
Yeah.
I'm done with those.
Yeah.
Give me something different.
Yeah.
And it can be Peter Parker, but fuck Uncle Ben. I don't need that shit anymore.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they did that shit. He can just be,
like, living with his aunt. Yeah. And she's, like, not an old lady who's about to die.
And my thing is, okay, so this is a good way to segue into this. I boycotted after Spider-Man 2 in the Tobey Maguire series because...
Oh, man, that shit was so fucking lame.
It was super lame, but what I was like... and I boycotted the Andrew Garfield because what I realized at the time is if I'm a fan, a quote-unquote fan, and the studio is releasing this shit, the only way I can tell them that I'm not accepting this shit is to not watch it. I'm not going to watch this shit. I didn't watch X2. I didn't watch the final, whatever the fuck it was.
I think I bought those at a bargain bin when, what's up, cat? Oh. I think I got those movies at a bargain bin because I didn't want to support them in the theater.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see them, and it was before the internet was, like, delivering all sorts of copyright pirated material that's just... You know, all you got to do is search on Google, and if you can't find it, it's just wait a couple days and it'll appear.
Yeah, I watched Endgame the 25th.
Yeah.
Whenever it got released in China, I watched the fucking version with it was like a bootleg shit that you used to get in the ghetto. I mean, you used to get in the ghetto, but anytime you watch a bootleg video and that's like on a DVD, you see the audience and the audience is laughing. You hear the audience, but this was a Chinese audience, so it was interesting to have the different experience. Because the Chinese audience cheered when Captain America said that shit too. It's interesting to see, like, oh, that shit. Nobody gives a fuck if it's Captain America if they're Chinese. They'll fucking support the shit out of him when he says Avengers Assemble, or I'm sure their hair stood up on the back of their neck too when he said that shit, because they were cheering like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
And you hear it in the bootleg because the audience is there, or the times when the jokes that land and shit like that. It's interesting to see.
I think the Chinese are an interesting example because they have a very long, strong, proud history of real heroes. And so when your heroes are like the foundations of modern kung fu or modern cooking or medicine or Eastern medicine, obviously we're talking about China here, but when your real legitimate heroes existed, Confucius was fucking real.
Yeah.
He wasn't just this like name that we attach to these clever sayings that help people resolve internal conflict and also figure out like how the universe works. It's not just a convenient way to normalize or materialize these ideas. It's because a real dude thought these things and talked about them with other people. I mean, these were scholars. They weren't just like monks sitting in a room like contemplating existence. They were talking about existence.
Right.
So,
well, it's interesting to the story I've heard about the origins of kung fu or gung fu is that the original practitioner or the original creator of it as a practice was an Indian who visited China and saw the monks needed to start. He visited a monastery,
defend themselves.
And but they also were not physically fit, so he gave them a regimen of defense movements.
Yeah.
And it was an intersection of Indian and Chinese culture that created kung fu or gung fu, and it was not a single culture, but it was like an intersection.
Yeah. Well, incidentally, that's where all of the coolest stuff in humanity has happened. It's at the intersection of ideas. It's where, in fact, it's where several ideas come together in that one point where it all seems to magnify or amplify each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we get things like space flight or flight in general. Or that's when we get the idea to harness ionic charge and create light, the legit "let there be light" moment. Let's turn this thing on.
Yeah.
These things are rarely...
Well, because there's like a story about a Chinese guy who strapped himself to a rocket chair, right?
Oh my god. There are stories about Chinese dudes like building box kites the size of houses and riding them to the sky because they're trying to get to the moon. I mean, it's a cool culture. They actually did build giant box kite fortresses and would fire rockets at people in mountain overpasses.
That's awesome.
Because, hey, we know how to build a giant floating fortress.
Well, and those things could potentially be the origins of, well, not these could be all separate origins of things like flying carpets, because then if you've seen gigantic carpets before, in the sense of if King Solomon had
rooms,
weavers
like basketball court size carpet rooms.
The principles of a hot air balloon could potentially work with a carpet of that size, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they did in fact have flying carpets, but it wasn't magic, it was heat and surface area, as with hot air balloons. And I think that's, obviously, if you look, people hate Ancient Aliens because they always jump to the dumbest, most ridiculous conclusion, but there is a scientific possibility of a flying carpet working, and they just haven't really examined it. I don't remember a Mythbusters episode where they try to do a flying carpet or anything.
I think that I don't think that it's I think that conceptually people, when they think of flying carpets, they think of the thing that Aladdin rode. It's exactly. Just a little. It's the same size as the carpet in someone's living room. It's only 7 by 9 feet, or.
But when you see them in the illuminated scripts, they actually look like carriages or something that has a lower section and an upper section. in the sense of where you're gonna sit, and then the thing at the top is almost like, I think are they called carriage beds?
I think so.
They have the posts on them, and then you put the curtains. It looks like a carriage bed in some of the scripts. So.
Yeah, but I think that was always like in the westernized like Arabian Nights tales. They always make it look like I think they go to extra effort to make it look like a rug, or a carpet.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. The few like books that I've seen from the Middle East or Turkey or anywhere, the illustration styles are so foreign to me because they're just not from America, and I have limited exposure to some of these things. And it's really interesting to look at these things because we can only look at them with I can only look at them with Western eyes. I can only Westernize, everything that I see because that's the scope of my vision.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always really incredible to get that kind of exposure to foreign cultures because some of them, there are similarities, and some things I feel like are universal. Like generally, like a well-cooked piece of meat or a properly cooked piece of meat is like pretty universal. If it tastes good, it's generally good.
Right.
But there are some things that are like that I've tried that just don't work. Like certain pickled vegetables to me have been pretty bad. There's like a range where I guess it starts to verge too far for just for my taste, and I think that's westernization at work. My mom's tried to give me things that she considered like Chinese snacks, and some of them are really good, like dried squid. It's basically squid jerky.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll eat that.
It's funny because it's funny you say that.
But then cuttlefish, like if it's just in its unprocessed form, I look at it, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. No, I think I got lucky early on when I was, I think probably it must have been 11 or 12. I was exposed to, I don't know if it's pickled, but it's like raw fish that's in, I think, either garlic juice or onion oil or onion juice or something. I don't know if onion juice, quote unquote, is a technical term. But I remember trying this early on, and it was something where
was it like a ceviche type thing where it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so weird.
It is super weird, but it is. And trying it so early, it made me predisposed to be like, oh, if somebody's like, oh, you want to try some eel? Okay,
like, yeah,
sure, yeah. Want to try some alligator? Okay. So I tried different stuff early on, and there's points where I won't, uncooked bugs I won't eat.
Yeah, insects mess me up.
Cooked insects. I haven't really been in a spot to try cooked insect yet. I haven't really sought it out, but when I get to that point, I'm gonna have to think real hard about which insect it is.
It's usually fried.
Yeah.
And by the time it's pulled out of the batter, it's basically a shell inside of some batter.
Yeah.
Or out of the fryer, and so it pretty much loses the entire insect quality.
Right. Which exactly at that point, that's when I'm like, what's the point?
I think they have to be fondued.
Yeah,
I think that's the only way to really do insects right. You got to dip them in some molten chocolate, or on like a skewer with a slice of strawberry.
And I don't see the point.
And then exactly at that point,
and that's where.
Well, we could puff some quinoa and
might as well, or a grape,
or a grape.
Let's eat a fucking grape.
Yeah, it's just as.
So that's kind of where to me it's one of those things where, but then. So when I was in Nigeria,
no, that's like a necessity or dare range of culinary traditions.
But at the same time, when I was in Nigeria, they were like, "Oh, you need to go try a giant snail because it's something you eat to make you it helps your vitality, or it's like something that the locals eat to make them." Feel more strong or something.
I feel like that's also
and I'm like, okay, let's go do that. So I went and tried it, and I ate the whole thing. And at first, it was I won't say it was disgusting. It was unlike anything. It was
like
as if I was eating a tire. That's probably. I've never eaten a tire, but that's probably the closest thing. But once I let myself, once I let myself get into it, it was like, okay, this is its own thing.
So I've eaten escargot, and I feel like escargot is a puffier, less muscular, simultaneously undercooked, but high temperature flash cooked on the exterior shrimp.
Oh, yeah.
And so it really depends on what else you're serving it with that determines like how it comes out. So I can only imagine that one of those African giant slugs. Cause I've seen pictures of those like gargantuan, they're like the size of a human head before they get cooked.
Yeah, this one probably, it was bigger than a fucking Cinnabon.
Well,
it definitely was bigger than a Cinnabon.
I can only imagine that to be like the biggest variation of that, like lobster tail, but like the size.
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, and it was tougher than lobster.
But the inside is like kind of weirder. It's like not quite as.
I mean, it's just from what I remember, it was just kind of just the same consistency.
Yeah.
Where that's when trying it, I was like, whatever. It's
okay.
A giant snail. I don't know how else to think of it. It was just one big continuous muscle.
Yeah.
But underdeveloped. If somebody was about to go to the gym their entire life
like I said,
never made it.
It's like a shrimp that never a shrimp that never worked out.
Yeah. A shrimp that just sat in one spot its entire life and watched everything float by.
Oh.
But yeah, it's things like that and I don't know if it was placebo or not. I did feel as if my immune system got a boost from it.
I believe it. No, straight up. Like everything that I read about shark fin soup was confirmed when I tried it. Like the whole like weird virility boost, like the whole like extra like
makes you feel. I definitely get that shit with deer, wild deer.
Well, like fresh, venison is like that too, because you get that like there's like that wildness to it.
Anything that's like a wild animal, it's way different, and that's kind of where. Excuse me. I'm trying to eat less meat because part of it is when you do feel the difference between a wild animal and something that's been farm raised, it's not only unethical, it's just not good energy. The farm raised, factory farmed animal, it's like a gross energy that I don't know if people aren't able to discern what they're eating, they're not gonna fucking know the difference. They'll be like, oh, I'm tired or something, but it's really the energy that comes from that animal is just not a good fuel. It's not good fuel. It's bad fuel. There's in the same way that people will be like, oh, my car only takes premium, then go fucking eat a factory farmed animal in their body. It's shitty fuel. I mean. And this is where the better fuel is not going to be as easily processed, so it shouldn't be using it all the time. Or you shouldn't need it all the time because once you get it, it should be more effective.
So practically all gasoline at fuel pumps nowadays has some measure of ethanol in it, some kind of alcohol, but it also contains any number of detergents depending on the refinery and their combination of chemicals. And so in a lot of ways, it is a good idea to change up your fuel supplier because different detergent combinations will affect the kind of buildup that occurs differently, and it's good. It's good to take those things out of the system. But more importantly, I have a car from 1995. It's a truck actually, and when I put normal pump gas in it, it suffers. And part of that is that the ethanol mixture, the blended gases, they know that there's like a reduction in potential energy stored within the fuel versus like a pure gasoline, no detergents, or pure gasoline with detergents, no ethanol.
Yeah.
And so there's a gas station nearby that sells alcohol-free gas, 87 octane, because that's what most trucks, most off-road vehicles are meant for. Most lawnmowers will use that kind of octane gas. But when I put that in my truck, it runs like incredibly. It starts. I'm able to achieve the fuel economy that I was promised on the on the sticker on the inside for the window sticker for the truck.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. It's like it runs fantastically. It's also like right now it's like 289 I think, or 279 for regular, somewhere in that range. It's probably like 369, 379 for the alcohol-free gas.
Yeah. Damn.
And
it's still 87.
It's still 87 octane.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, I know, because it's more expensive than premium.
Right. Yeah, it's totally more expensive than premium.
But the thing is, if I use premium in my truck, it runs terribly.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. Because it's a low compression engine. It's tuned for low octane gas. And I've tried. Oh no. The exception is when I do something like go and get like boat fuel or racing fuel, and then occasionally you get something that has like like 110 octane or 113 octane and something really high, some dumb number, and it has no alcohol in it. And then sometimes it's all alcohol.
Yeah.
Fuel is
and then sometimes people fucking put water in their shit.
Oh God.
Oh, I hate it because it happens ever so often, and sometimes it's not necessarily on purpose, because it may be after a big storm or a flood or some shit.
Yeah.
But then they do it on purpose ever so often, where and it's usually Speedway where I get the watered gas, and it's like man, the car instantly starts shaking and the cylinders misfire, and it's just frustrating. One of the things that frustrates me so much about, I'm going to start calling it post-colonial capitalism, and you just can't call it capitalism. Like, people call it crony capitalism, but I'll call it post-colonial capitalism, is that whenever I buy something, I always have to worry if it's going to work or not.
And not just work, but how long is it going to work?
Exactly. It's not... It's everyone. I think everyone has become so used to it that it's just what we do now. But the idea was that competition, or quote unquote pure capitalism, which we definitely don't have, was supposed to give us the best product on the market with the best outcome for the consumer. But then at the same time, in the boardroom, the best way to get the biggest return for the investor is to get the highest profit margin by giving the consumer the worst quality product at the highest price. So those things don't jive, but as consumers, we're still in the spot where
everything is disposable.
Everything's disposable. Everything doesn't work most of the time, and we're stuck in cycles of...
No, there's an engineered time till failure.
Yeah, manufactured failure cycles.
Yeah.
And it's like, the whole thing with the automobiles feels like we're in one of those where our parents were in oil-based combustion engines. They had the access, well, not the access, the concept for obviously the electric car concept's been around for about 100 years.
And we actually had more options in the early part of the 1900s.
Yeah.
We had more options of electric cars. The only problem was the batteries.
Right. And then on top of that, then the battery development was stifled for the sake of making it... Well, there's a couple things, because car companies don't want to use a common battery. Everybody wants to use their own proprietary technology. So then what ends up happening is you can't have trade off battery stations. You have to have charging stations instead of a trade off. Because what to me was always it would have been a smarter model for electric cars is if you have battery stations where the batteries are always charging, you just go in there and switch it out and it's instant.
There is.
But if you don't have same models.
Back in the 80s, Ford released a F-150 truck with a 6-cylinder engine, like a 4-liter 6-cylinder engine, something like that had a conversion to propane. So you could go to your local gas station and disconnect your propane and then plug in a low pressure gas or a liquid propane gas canister, like a module. Just plug it in and run off that. And I think that's actually that's kind of actually a step in the right direction of being able to just have interchangeable fuel instead of having like a tank
that you have to keep filling up.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason they have, because here's the thing, what you end up finding out is when it comes to military vehicles, they have to build them in a modular manner because if they break down on the battlefield, they have to be able to switch them out really quick.
Or they have to be able to salvage parts.
Exactly. So a lot of the things, somebody should be able to change their own oil. It should be modular. It should be accessible from your glove compartment. It shouldn't be something that
maybe not from the glove compartment.
I mean, you know what I'm saying. Yeah. In the sense of
you should be able to open up the hood, and then there should be a place where you unscrew 4 things, and then you pull out a module, and then everything. I mean, like changing your ink cartridge on a printer.
The only reason I say it should be accessible from the glove compartment is because changing the oil is something that has to be done ever so often, so it should actually be made easier for the individual rather than making it still, oh, you change your oil by going in the engine. Like, no, actually, you change, because what you end up finding out is a lot of these cars have batteries in the back seat. Yeah. The battery doesn't have to be under the hood.
No,
there's nothing that says the battery has to be under the hood. There's nothing.
Some cars have multiple batteries.
Right. That's true.
Some cars have.
But then some that have multiple batteries, then the second battery's in the trunk, and it's not even under the hood.
One of my buddies, his car has he has a direct injection engine, and so it has 2 fuel pumps. One's mechanical, and then one is an electrical pump.
Yep.
And it's that's kind of the standard now.
Yeah.
If you have a modern direct injection,
in case one fails as well.
Well, no, it's not even redundancy. It's that one sends fuel to the reservoir to be pressurized because of the high pressure injection systems, and so it's like, back to my truck from the 90s. That thing is really old now. It's like pushing 25. It's old enough that it doesn't run well on modern gas. That's my dilemma. It's basically the only thing that it's going to be good for is being like a local driving around and hauling some dumb stuff, camping, and fortunately there's an off-road park within a reasonable distance of me, so I can at least go and have fun with it. But it's not like I can't get the full fuel economy unless I spend an extra $1 per gallon.
And then the cost effectiveness is gone.
Then the total cost of operation just starts to not just creep, just climb. Yeah. And that's fine because it's a utility vehicle. It's not supposed to be a daily driver. I'm actually trying to find a daily driver because I don't want to be driving a truck around all the time. Yeah. I really like driving it around, but I also want it to last a long time so that I can drive it all sorts of places off road, because there are parts of Indiana that you can't just drive a normal car to because there are pits in the road where it's full of water. And I mean, you can drive your car into whatever you want to drive your car into. I'm not going to stop anybody from doing whatever they feel like doing to their vehicle. I probably wouldn't do it without a proper vehicle. But there are places that you can't really get to. They're just inaccessible. And those places are awesome, and they reflect like the real natural beauty of Indiana, of this region of the country, and those are the things that are worth preserving. But you know what? I want to be able to see them, and I can walk that far with enough water so that I don't suffer dehydration and then heat exhaustion and potential heat stroke. And a couple of people might know that I'm out there, but nobody really knows where I am, so no one's going to come find me, and then I'm going to be dead. And then someone's going to find some, TN jerky on a trail someplace, and, I could have driven there.
No reason that needs to happen.
Yeah. And eventually, the society will say, hey, this place is pretty cool, because enough people know about it, and they'll say we need a more suitable road access so that people can see this stuff, and then that's how state parks form, because someone finds a really cool place that's worth sharing and can be shared without being destroyed, and that's really the key. We have to be able to not destroy shit.
Yeah.
We have a.
It's amazing how much untouched land there still is, just in the sense of even in America. There's shit to just you think it's been explored, but it hasn't.
I spent so much time on Google Earth, just like zoomed in, just checking shit out.
Yeah.
I mean, you can learn. It's the best free globe that's ever existed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's constantly updated.
You see how untouched a lot of shit is, though. Because that's the one thing I notice when I'm flying any place across America is it's way more green than anything. You know, it sucks that global warming is happening, but it's a lot easier to forget how untouched everything else is when you're living in a city. As soon as you get outside of a city, you realize how nature just fucking takes over everything, and there's some.
So, to that point, Sheila and I were driving through Yellowwood State Park, and you know, a lot of it has some pretty nice road. Looks like it's fairly recent, but we found this one spot where there's kind of a mound in the middle of the asphalt, and a fucking groundhog popped its head up. It was like stuck its head up out of the road, and then like saw the truck, was like nope, and then dipped.
That's amazing.
Maybe it was a gopher, but it was big enough to see, you know, from the inside of a truck that was moving. Nature finds a way. Nature.
It does. It really does, man.
Because I don't think a groundhog did that. I think that it was like some other.
Well,
it has to be some kind of force at work.
There's some of them that I think can get through stone, though.
That's some crazy shit.
Yeah.
They're so like they're like I'm gonna get through, so they dig through all that gravel.
It may be a groundhog, but yeah, because I know near a friend's house there was a hole that came through, and he said it was. Well, I think it might have been a groundhog.
Yeah.
It was either groundhog or.
It has to be a groundhog. It has to be something big enough to like move gravel and then eventually, like, you know, because.
Well, moles are pretty fucking.
Moles are
crazy too. They're
a lot bigger than people think they are.
Yeah.
Moles are pretty. Well, some of them are big.
Yeah. Because we have some rocks by our place that the moles came up through, and you know, they came through. I mean, plastic's not a big deal, but they came through the plastic and then up through the rocks. So they weren't afraid.
Yeah, moles, voles, chipmunks. Some of them are pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I like chipmunks because you can pet them and not get gross. They clean themselves too much. I mean, not too much, but enough to the point where you can pet them and not have to necessarily worry about getting mites or something. It's like they're really worried about that shit too.
Yeah. Well, some squirrels you can feed by hand too.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
it's just a matter of like, there's a base spectrum of intelligence for all of these little critters within like the realm of what they do, and some are smart enough to recognize, hey, this person's just trying to give me that nut. That thing looks really good. I want that thing. I'm gonna eat it, and you know. They'll grab it from you, and it might take a while, but eventually they'll be chill about it. I mean, you've got like an album of feeding animals, and you've got tiny animals walking up to your front door, your back door, so that stuff cracks me up. Like, especially when there's like multiple critters in the frame.
Yeah, there's always at least 4 or 5 of them out there, at least.
Yeah.
There's probably 12 doves. And what's interesting is to see how the animals work together, because some of them, they actually straight work together, like chipmunks and doves work together. Because then the brown-headed cowbirds, I wouldn't call it working together. They'll replace dove eggs with their own. So then the doves raise a brown-headed cowbird as their own child, but it's because they don't kill it or kick it out. So you often see a dove with a adopted kid.
Hey, you know what? That just means that birds have worked out some kind of like social welfare program
That's exactly what
that
it
works in a way that's efficient, and you know, if they have a success rate, if they have a success rate,
Doves are the best orphan parents.
what can we take away from this? Take in the kids, don't kick them out. Don't be mean to their parents if you find them.
Well, because then it makes you wonder if the cowbirds end up putting their
Kids with the doves,
because they had good dove parents.
Yeah. Well, even better. I mean, imagine how the cowbirds would turn out if the doves weren't there to rear their kids.
That's what I'm saying.
We'd have generations of assholes.
They'd act like bluebirds.
Yeah.
Them asshole
Doves,
bluebirds.
please just, no matter what it takes, just step up and raise those bluebird eggs. Those blue jays are dicks. They need help.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, man. Usually when I hear angry bird, it's either a blue jay or a fucking bluebird. Well, yeah.
Some blue jay. Yeah. They're the mean ones. Or it's a freaking woodpecker and it's like tuck, 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 for like hours. I've got a woodpecker over there somewhere.
They're loud, but I guess I wouldn't call them ferocious, but they get scared very easily by other birds, as far as I can tell.
The ones that we get some finches around here, and sometimes I see these cardinals. And for the last 2 years, we've had a mimosa tree that was like the best hummingbird feeder imaginable, and we get like several groups of hummingbirds. Hopefully the mimosa comes back to life because it's taking its sweet time compared to everything else.
I know the hummingbirds have been back a couple times. I don't know if they're here permanently yet, but
yeah, probably a temperature-related thing.
Oh, for sure. Well, they'll come sometimes in early April or mid-April, leave and then come back. They go, I think, all the way to South America.
Really? Hummingbirds? Yeah. God, that's like, proportionally, that's got to be like going into, a low Earth orbit.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. Because I think they can live, was it 3 to 4 years, I believe? So you may have the same hummingbird coming back multiple times in its life.
That's kind of cool. I noticed recently that I've seen more hawks, red-tailed hawks.
Mm-hmm.
I've also seen, well, I guess, I don't know if I've seen more of them. I've noticed a similar amount of, like those buzzard-looking things. Those, turkey vultures.
Yeah, there's a ton of those.
That only means that there's more dead stuff around. That's not good.
Well, but then if there's more dead stuff, that means there's more live stuff, probably. Most likely, I would assume.
Yeah, or more things are just getting hit by cars.
Well, but more things will be getting hit by cars because there's more things. That's a byproduct.
Yeah,
because I don't think there's necessarily more roads. There's actually less roads in the summer because they cut shit off because of the construction. So that's why I think, well, it's also, everything just had their babies and shit. It's just out there.
Yeah, that's true. I have noticed more of smaller variety of animals. Oh man, so I saw this video of a guy and his dog out for a walk someplace, and they come across like some cougar cub, not a cub, an adolescent cougar.
Mm-hmm.
And in the video, it's like this guy was really lucky to have his dog around, and this cat was basically just like, what the fuck is that thing? And the only time you see the cat hiss is when the dog is like getting its face and barking. And instead of like pulling away and like backing away from this cougar, the guy with his camera gets closer to it. And it's like, what in what universe is it a good idea to have a dog in any kind of leash, let it get closer to a fucking cougar of any age? Because if it's a young cougar, like a cub, then the dog kills it. And then you're just a fucking asshole for letting your dog kill a fucking cougar cub. Or you like are dealing with an adolescent cougar, and holy shit, what if its mom is around and like behind you and you have no idea where its mom is, because those fucking things are master hunters. Or you stumble across an adult cougar. Your dog is no match for an adult cougar. I hope you have a firearm. And then you killed a cougar, and then you're an asshole. Like, no matter how this works out, unless the human backs away from this situation, it all ends up with death and a person becoming an asshole.
Yeah.
It sucks.
I mean, and this is, to me, one of the reasons when it comes to how Americans treat animals that aren't dogs. It's pretty gross. That's why we have so much roadkill. People don't slow down for fucking animals as if a squirrel just doesn't matter. Oh, I hit a squirrel and I killed. Like, the fact that people look at squirrels and rabbits or anything that they hit, or even a raccoon or a possum, if you fucking hit it and it doesn't mean anything.
No, they assign points.
Right. Oh no, those are gross people.
That's the inhuman level.
Because there's people that go after them and speed up, but I'm talking about the people that just, like, if the thing runs across, they don't think about it. It's like not even there, and they don't slow down and they still hit it because to them it's like, oh, it's a squirrel. I'm just gonna keep going. Or even if it was a cat, a lot of these times people. If it was a cat, they wouldn't fucking care either. But if it was a dog, they'd wreck their fucking car trying to avoid it. It's the craziest shit, man. It's the craziest shit. It's so weird because it's one of these things that I've noticed in the sense of it comes back to media and what we're shown as to why there's so many talking dog movies. Dogs are more humanized than women and minorities in this country.
Well, dogs...
Specifically.
Dogs' feet and their diets have run parallel with the development of humans' walkways in our diet. Like, dogs can digest practically everything that we eat, except for, like, grapes and onions and garlic, I think. And there's a range of, like, pharmaceuticals that you definitely should not give your dog, like ibuprofen. Give a dog ibuprofen, you're pretty much gonna... kill it. Mm-hmm. But don't give your dog pharmaceuticals. But you're right. We have more story. Well, it's man's best friend.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
white man, because that's the same dog that fucking is used in the slave patrols. You know what I'm saying? That ain't the black man's best friend. That's the canine unit.
And if you meet somebody if you meet somebody who actually is best friends with a big cat, like, that's kind of actually terrifying, because
Mike Tyson.
Yeah, like that dude has enough just presence that big cats are like, yeah, I can chill with this dude. He's cool.
Yeah, because
but then that can backfire. I mean, Siegfried and Roy.
Oh, absolutely. But this is what I was about to say. In the sense of a lot of people who have big cats will treat them as pets
instead of
versus Mike had these things that they saw him as another alpha animal, and he could go in there and lounge with them. Right. And it was not something where he had to, like, I'm sure he had him chained. But there's a difference between Mike Tyson and Siegfried and Roy in the sense of that's why Mike Tyson could go in there with this fucking...
Well, he just wants to have some big cats. Yeah. And Siegfried and Roy are like, no, we're going to make you perform.
Yeah. And I'm sure they had a rapport because those weren't wild tigers anyway. They were raised from...
they were selected
cubs,
from as cubs because they had the right kind of features.
Exactly. So they weren't even wild. So it's not, again, this is... Everybody ain't fucking Mike Tyson to be able to hang out with some tigers and not get attacked.
You gotta straight up be fucking Genghis Khan or Kublai Khan to have a freaking tiger.
Yeah.
And even then, it's probably doped up so that it just sits there and is chill. The real tiger is behind the throne.
Right. Yeah.
The real tiger is waiting in the hallway, the side halls, because they know that nobody uses them except for people up to no good.
Yeah.
They let the tiger walk around freely at night because nobody should be in the halls. And that thing is quiet.
Yeah. Have you ever snuck up on a cat? Their faces are hilarious.
Yeah. When they jump.
You're like, I'm supposed to be the one that does that, not you.
Or when you catch them like really like involved in whatever they're doing, and they're like, and then they see you and they're like, you weren't supposed to see that.
Right, yeah.
And then they tear off into
it's
another room.
Man, that's so interesting. I still have not gotten over that cats domesticated themselves, because then that
What, did they choose to live with us?
I
For the
mean,
most part.
they domesticated themselves.
Yeah.
Like the history of cats is that they showed up in ancient Egypt, and the first story of a cat being domesticated is that they showed up at the edge of the town and began socializing with the people, so they effectively domesticated themselves.
Yeah.
And that's also why they don't listen to commands, and they're not as easily bred as dogs, because they were not domesticated. There's a huge difference, and this is why you have squirrels potentially domesticating themselves.
Well, that's why if we look at servals or cockerel or any of the exotic cats, they are only a couple generations away or from being fully wild, typically.
Yeah.
And you can only have them up to into I think fourth or fifth generation before they start to lose the wild physical traits and start looking like domestic cats. And to the point that but not like what we consider to be a domestic cat breed, in the sense that they look like them, but they are intellectually challenged in ways that are, it's not right to do that to them.
Yeah.
To breed them into that kind of tiny genetic pool of themselves. And so that nice second, third generation range, if you've got the cat whisperer skills or whatever, they're amazing. Like, because they're bigger than normal cats, just a little bit bigger, and they're super intelligent, like holy crap intelligent. Make the smartest cat or dog seem like a child, like now you're dealing with an adult cat that can reason with you.
Well, it's funny. Now they finally figured out that cats can't understand; they just choose to ignore.
Yeah.
So this is where, when you're talking about the cat whisperer, you can herd cats. You just have to reason with them.
Yeah.
It's not herding; it's reasoning.
No, exactly.
And again, it's like a lot of people would not, if you had never had a cat long enough to get that, then it sounds crazy and sounds, oh no, they don't listen to anything. Like, no, they understand everything.
Yeah.
Not everything, but a large degree of what you're saying, and they have a vocabulary of words in the same sense of I think it's like super dogs can learn up to 250 words, or maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
And the other, like the average dog knows about 120 words or something. But that's beyond just sit, because then when you think about it, if you know 250 words, then you know the context of those things, and that's a whole lot of context. You can establish a lot of context with 250 words. So they probably,
Well, I think that comes down to how many syllables within a command you can pack in before the dog starts to lose track of what they were hearing.
No, it's not about commands. It's words.
Oh, it's actual
It's words.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. It's not commands. It's words. It's a difference.
So then
They
there's
know
like
actual words
because they can
recognize
for them.
That's what I'm saying. They can recognize like the super dogs that are the most intelligent breeds, because this is why you have the German shepherds.
So that's why
that are like on the police force. They have to pass tests and shit. So they know words.
But that's why they respond to like actual expressions of disappointment.
Exactly.
Because they internalize like more than just the tone and.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So this is where.
Oh, that's incredible.
The notion of...
It's funny. I talked to Bruce like that. I said like, I know you can understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's funny. As soon as I say that, he like really sits down and he's ready. And then, actually, I haven't had to say that to him in a long time. He ran across the street one time, and it was like, it's terrifying because people drive like 60 miles an hour over the hill.
Yeah.
When they crest that hill, it's like... I pull out and I have to get on the gas and go like 40 miles an hour just to get to the bottom of the hill where it drops down to 35 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, whatever it is. The speed limit goes down a little bit, but then there's still somebody who just crested the hill going 60 miles an hour, like right upon me. It sucks.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that I didn't really think about, or maybe I thought about, but I didn't think it was going to be as big of an issue.
Right. I mean, maybe you didn't have that thought when you were like
looking for housing.
Right.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't really consider it as much of as much of an impact. But it kind of sucks. Like the first thing you do when you pull out of the driveway is to like mash the gas pedal.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
have to.
Yeah, have to.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can get away. Like there are certain times, like in the evening, when I can see like.
When you can see lights coming.
Yeah, when you can see lights reflecting on the trees, it's easier to know. It's like I don't have to get on the gas. But when there's like wind and it's light out, and all I can hear is other cars, and you can't really tell, it sucks. It's just like, man, okay, whatever. And then get pull out, then get on the gas because there's somebody right on you already. I live in the country. I'm not supposed to. I guess it's not really the country. It's like the fringe, the zone between country and city, and it's just outside of the city. So I guess I shouldn't expect that kind of driving density. I got to be more realistic. And as Bloomington expands, so will the density of traffic.
Hopefully.
Well, it should. If it doesn't, then where is it expanding up? Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they passed some kind of like a height limit ordinance on downtown Bloomington.
Well, they took it away.
Oh, they took it away?
Yeah.
Oh,
there used to be one.
Well, then they're just going to build them up.
Yeah.
Because that's the best way to do it.
Because originally the building, no building could go higher than
like 4 stories or something.
It was
maybe that's for
there was buildings. There's like something on top of the city hall that it can go. There's like a cauldron or some shit.
Oh wow!
Like some capstone or some shit or whatever's on top of city hall. No building could go higher than that. And then they took away that regulation, and now that's why there's apartment buildings downtown that are bigger. Because the issue is, say, okay, if you go to Smallwood or something, because of the way the city hills rolled out, they started it lower than the Capitol building, so when they built it, the 12th floor, the top floor, whatever, still wasn't higher than the thing. So, but that's how they were able to still build tall buildings without breaking that rule back in the day, because I think Smallwood was built before that rule was taken away.
Well, I know that there was when I first moved to Bloomington, there was one really tall building, and pretty much everything else was shorter than it. And then slowly everything north of it's that really tall building on 6th, 6th and College, the corner of 6th and College, the northwest corner of 6th and College. And it was like the tallest building, and next to it used to be a parking garage, a 2-layer parking garage. And that's where all the cruisers would go and park and prepare to go party somewhere, back in the day. They'd drive up and down the strip and do a round, the thing bumping their systems. And then they took away the parking garage and then built, I think it's got like coaches at the bottom floor, whatever that, maybe it's a Hilton or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hotel downtown, and then that's right next to the jail.
Right.
I always thought it was funny, like the cruisers would go and hang out at the parking garage that was right next to the jail.
Yeah.
At least-
Safest place is right next to the jail, right?
Well, I guess, if you're going to wake up in jail on a Sunday and get released on a Monday, you want your truck nearby.
Whenever I'm on the highway, I always know if I get behind a cop, I feel way less likely that I'm going to get a ticket. Because then if I pass a cop and he tries to pull me out, I'm going, what? I'm just following this guy. Like, he's, like, how am I breaking this law if this guy, his lights aren't on,
Yeah. I think that every time I've seen, like, a state trooper, I don't know, I roll around with a radar detector because I've had one for years, for decades at this point. I've had some kind of form of radar detector. And at first, it was because I thought I was going to be able to, like, save myself from speeding tickets. But it never actually saved me from speeding tickets. Whenever I got, like, actually, popped, it was like a laser or some other new emerging technology. And it was also because I fell victim to some speed trap. Because
that's why Waze is awesome.
Yeah, Waze is fantastic.
I almost use it. I mean, I do use it just driving in Indiana a lot of times just to avoid the speed traps.
But the coolest, here's the best reason to have a radar detector. It's, first, you should always be paying attention to traffic conditions. And if you see an accordion start to collapse because there's some state trooper who's posted up, well, that's just you just got to pay attention to that. And you can tell that there's one coming up because traffic going the other direction will be expanding from some accordion. It'll just be dispersing. So you can kind of read the traffic situation. But the reason to have a radar detector is because construction sites typically have, your speed this is the speed things. And those have a different type of radar emitter than a police car. And so it has its own type of beep. So you can be driving and have information coming in real time that says, hey, you're approaching a construction site. And oftentimes other emergency vehicles will have their own little emitter.
Gotcha.
And so you'll know that some emergency vehicle is approaching you from some direction, either in front of you or behind you. Typically, sometimes you're in a city and you might get some weird ghost traffic from the sides as you go through an intersection, but that's beside the point. And now here's the coolest. So with the emergence of all of these driver assist, lane change assist, so it watches to make sure you're not veering into another lane, and it starts beeping if you do. And it'll also slow if you have cruise control engaged and you approach another vehicle, it'll slow down to match the vehicle in front of you's speed. A lot of new cars have all this stuff, and it's cool. It's good. It is actually safer for the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
But it also creates a situation where the operator of a vehicle might not be paying attention.
Yeah.
So what it tells me is, because those vehicles have their own radar systems, and my radar detector picks it up. What that thing tells me is there might be somebody out there who's not paying attention to the road. Yeah. So start paying attention. And in the past, couple of months, it's worked out where I'm just driving along and I hear beeping along, and then next thing I know, somebody drives right next to me on the highway, and it's like, seriously, there's like 2 lanes over there. Why'd you have to get 2 feet away from me, traveling 65 miles an hour? That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's kind of, since what you're talking about is...
But I'm utilizing this technology so that I have awareness of modern vehicles that emit radars.
It's almost IoT, and that's kind of where...
Yeah.
People don't realize the benefit of cars being able to communicate with each other.
Oh, yeah.
And understand communicate with the environment at that. So, I'm not sure how many people understand how much of the flight process is automated and has been for a long time.
For decades.
Yeah, so then when people are resisting automated cars...
My radar detector freaks out when I'm approaching a group of cars that are all stopped. It'll go insane because it has all these conflicting signals. And so I hope that I don't approach a group of stopped cars in a fog at high speed. But I also think that it's important to have an idea of what's going on, and that's I think that's the thing about you mentioned IoT and the Internet of Things. I've always envisioned a version of vehicular communication, intravehicular communication, that could not only communicate the average speed of vehicles, so that we could attain the 85th percentile of speed over a span of road, and to actually determine how fast can a group of cars travel safely, but also so that we could have better idea of how to redirect traffic if traffic patterns in a certain area start to become too congested. In a lot of ways, we can address this with Google and Waze, and we can adapt to our driving patterns to these things. But real-time telemetry and real-time information is really the key. And that's not to say that we all need to have a cellular data plan just for our car, because that's kind of absurd. There's probably a way to do this, to integrate it with our mobile devices, but really it would be better if the cars could all just communicate with each other on their own, and that's actually not impossible. Recently, Garmin, they've been making GPS units for the better part of 20 years, I feel like, but they released this all-road edition overlanding GPS, which has topographical maps and trail maps, and when it's updated, it updates with, because it's connected to a satellite network, it connects to real-time data, and so it can send and receive SMS. So
oh wow.
It's an emergency channel.
Jeez.
It's a $700 GPS unit, and it has a 7-inch touchscreen, so it's basically a tablet with real-time GPS and a sat-nav connection. So or sat-link, but it's always on, because it only requires 1 megabyte. Not even that. It probably only needs 10 kilobytes per second of real-time satellite data. But
that's crazy.
But that's the thing, But every car should have this. Mm-hmm. Every car should be able to communicate with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. But okay, so this is the problem with post-colonial capitalism. Every car should have that, but who's going to profit off of it?
That's the dilemma.
Yeah, that's what's keeping everybody from having that. So that single dilemma.
So when you get a citizens band radio, some of them are extra capable. They have weather band capabilities that they can tune into NOAA weather broadcasts. Mm-hmm. So depending on the region, you tune into whichever band has the best reception, because they're all on repeaters, and you get information. And so it's not impossible to make a well, I guess the problem is that it would be a socialized system, and then
that bad word.
There wouldn't. I know we have to. It would be a regulated function of civil utilities.
It should be a utility.
It should be.
And in fact, there's a national defense argument.
But if that's what I'm saying, is if we already have something similar to this for a citizens band radio, which is an underutilized communication method because it's open and you can't secure it. You just can't, unless you're willing to invest in considerable amounts of technology to do frequency modulation on the other sides, on both ends, for encryption and decryption, and you have to be able to agree upon those methods, tunings beforehand. That's tough shit.
But this is, again, why there is a national defense argument as to why there needs to be one of those networks that is encrypted for individuals to use to be able to communicate with other individuals, that also can be the national dissemination of information channel, because you don't want official information from, if the government needs to put out information, you don't want it to get polluted by
propaganda,
whether it's propaganda or any part of the process where someone private has to handle the communication. Because I guess in the sense of the post office is technically, obviously, a government organization, but it's not part of the government in the same way.
Privatized in the sense.
Yeah. So,
but they still have to maintain incredible standards established by the Congress.
Absolutely, yeah. No, so but then they also can't make an exorbitant profit, which is good for us. But then it makes it hard for them to operate.
It makes it hard for them to maintain any kind of real growth to satisfy the demands of a growing market.
Yeah.
That will always demand more. But that's good for, you know, UPS and FedEx.
I mean,
and hopefully Bezos will have like moon delivery systems up and running soon, where he'll just fire it out from the moon from his giant railgun.
Yeah.
It'll come in through the atmosphere, and you'll see this like glowing thing headed right towards
here's the
you.
thing.
Parachute will deploy.
So it's like, why should that have to come from him, and the government can't do the same thing?
Oh, I don't think it has to come from him. I just think it's more amusing to think of Bezos firing a capsule from the moon.
But I'm saying, all of the stuff that he's doing,
NASA could also be doing.
Right, but our population, well, not our.
You know, I would straight up rather buy products like selected by NASA than by Amazon.
Of course. Of course. But our country people have been convinced that it's more to their benefit for this dude to do this than NASA. Because the main thing is, if NASA did that and started turning a quote-unquote profit,
dude, NASA would
then we would get the dividend payments.
NASA wouldn't tell you an estimated time of delivery. They would tell you when it would be delivered.
Yeah.
Like they would be able to calculate it, like the delivery time. The packaging would like you'd take it into your house and you would pull a strip, and then it would like dissolve like around the package, and it would release like an air scrubbing oxygenated gas. And then as the foam would like dissipate, it would like clean the surface that you put it on. So like you could clean an entire room if you put it in the middle of a room. They could do stuff like that.
Yeah.
I realize that this is some like anime level like fantasy chemistry packaging, but if I can imagine this kind of stuff, there's no reason that it can't really exist at this
astronauts
point.
are recycling their own piss and shit to eat it now.
Yeah.
So
we're like,
NASA would definitely go that far.
Like straight up, NASA, you can have that idea. Just come back when you need more. I've got plenty.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm of the mind the whole, like I said, there is a large part of the population that would prefer that Jeff Bezos did it than NASA, because they are convinced that it's better for them that some individual dude is in charge of that than a shared initiative.
But that's just because the individual is typically unable to realize a long-term initiative's payout.
Right.
Because that's really that kind of investment is a state-level investment. That's something that a government organizes, because only a government really has the guaranteed longevity of 50 to 100 years in a sense. And that's actually a steep guarantee. That's like a steep,
God forbid you do something that benefits your grandkids.
I know, right?
God forbid.
And so this idea that it has to be, it's part of the mythology that things like this happen within a generation. I feel like if that was the case, the Great Wall wouldn't exist.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
that's like somebody asked me about reparations, and they're saying, "Oh, you'll probably never see them in your lifetime." And I'm like, "So that has nothing to do with the justice that needs to happen for them to be paid back. I don't have to get them. They don't need to go into my pocket. They need to be fucking paid. That doesn't mean they have to go into my pocket. They just have to be paid. Period. It could be 20 fucking 45 for all I care. It'd be better if it happens sooner than later.
It just has to start.
Absolutely. That's not, I'm not saying pay me.
It doesn't.
People act like when people say reparations need to be paid, they're like, I want to get paid. It's like,
but it
no,
shouldn't even
that's not what we're saying.
It shouldn't even, it's not even about like like starting to write checks. It's just agreeing that it has to begin.
And in fact,
it has to start somewhere.
I would make it so that it would have to be over at least 3 generations, and it doesn't all go to one generation.
Make it benefit entire communities.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to benefit multiple generations. I'm saying literally, it would have to benefit at least 3 generations, if not 5. Because the problem is, if you give it to one generation, they can fucking piss it away, and the next 2 generations don't even have anything.
Give it a school with an endowment that's held in trust over time.
I mean, it has to be beyond. It can't just be money. It has to be infrastructure.
No, I know,
money. Fucking like
that's what I mean. Like build a school, like a university.
Like you're saying, school,
like
university, hospitals, fucking railroads,
solution to expanding
airports,
everything.
all that shit.
Yeah.
Because then what happens is.
Well, I feel like it starts with education, and then it balloons from there. Like you start with the school, and the school needs to expand in various directions. The next thing you know, there's a medical school and a law school, and all these other things start to become bigger. And the next thing you know, you have a condition where you have a city that is known for its legal practices.
Those
like
things
Boston.
used to exist in the black community, but they've all been systematically destroyed or
eroded
for one way or another. Even down to the bombings in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 1900s. Yeah. A lot of people don't know about that. They don't teach you about that in history school, even though they teach you quote-unquote American history every other year. They don't teach you about Black Wall Street. They don't teach you about the Harlem Renaissance. And the crazy shit is black people don't learn about this stuff either. So then what ends up happening is the narrative that black people have not been able to do these things or can't do these things gets reinforced by people's ignorance of those things that have happened, and then it allows people to say those things can't be done, and then on top of that, it perpetuates the notion that black people are incapable. So hiding these things from people's knowledge base, it does a lot of damage to both the black image and the black psyche in a way that then you have black people like, why can't we do this? Like, no, we've already done it before, but they just weren't taught about it for one reason or another. And you get black people believing this stuff.
Well, it's the same reason that people, have a hard time comprehending that most of China looks like, the cities in America.
Right. Yeah.
Most of China looks like America, except it's almost all Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
And they speak a different language, but there are a lot of cars, there's a lot of pavement, lots of big ass buildings, surrounded by, inundated with marketing.
Yeah.
And there's some differences. They've got a truly authoritarian government, but ours is kind of shaping up to be like that right now.
Mm-hmm.
For what it's worth, I think that things are actually they could actually be a lot worse.
Of course.
I think that before, when we were younger, there was a Gulf War. There were 2 Gulf Wars, and then the second Gulf War turned into this whole Afghanistan debacle.
Right.
And now it's just this never-ending crusade again. Now it's the American crusade.
I mean, the crusades never stop.
Well, of course they didn't.
This is what I'm getting to when it comes to people being mistaught history.
Yeah,
they teach us the crusades.
You actually have to read about the whole crusades to realize that it didn't.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Americans don't read about the crusades.
Well, they stop with what is it, in the 12 whenever Islam starts to be recognized as this actual force.
They stop at the Islamic Golden Age because you can't learn about the Islamic Golden Age and still think the Islamic people are terrorists.
They have to redirect, and so they stop, and then it becomes this whole thing about the early the Western Enlightenment and Renaissance and the codification of legal systems, broad legal systems, and trade, and all of these systems. I mean, stuff's all important. But I'm pretty sure that some guy in Europe basically just found, the manuscript that the guys from China sent out with their officials to help establish new paths on the Silk Road, and they just translated and said, "Hey guys, check it out. There's a guide. It shows us how to do this.
Right.
Let's try this." And then it worked for the most part.
Yep.
because China had been doing that for probably 5,000 years at that point.
And that's what's, as someone who came up in the American education system, what they don't teach you about Chinese history concerning political and economic structure, that you then learn one way or another, or some people don't learn. Those things end up making you question why those things are occluded from American history, because then so if you look at how American history is taught, it's taught every other year, from kindergarten to high school. So if you're talking about 12, I guess it's, well, because they don't teach history in kindergarten. From 1st through 12th grade, they teach it every other year. So basically, 6 years of American history versus 6 years of world history. Then what ends up happening is, because you get such an imbalance of world history, you don't get any real exploration of Chinese history. You don't get any real exploration of Indian history. You don't get any real exploration of any African history, let alone get into different countries specifically. So when it comes to understanding how Chinese decentralized states have existed for a very long time, to understand that in many cases local politics in municipalities are more influential than the larger king or federated state, depending on the locality. There's a lot of stuff that has persisted and changed and evolved, and then the government has tried to stamp out, that are all these nuanced elements of historical societal progression, that once you learn about them, then you realize how not only young America is, but then how unevolved we actually are.
We
think we're way evolved.
It was like in the 1840s, I think, or in that range, during the gold rush, during the construction of the West and California and the railroads and all that stuff. There were laws passed to prevent Chinese people from owning property.
Yep.
And a lot of it, and black people too. But it was interesting.
And at the same time, the Homestead Act happened, which took land from the natives and gave it to white people. Yeah. Just gave it.
All that shit was
just gave it to them. And not just white people, white males, because white women, you can't be a white woman and own, like, in some cases they could, but they're not giving y'all land either, so.
Well, so what ends up happening, of course, is, these laws eventually are overturned, and really the worst thing that it did was it prevented Chinese from bringing the restaurant culture to America sooner. Because there is, like, an extended period of time where these restaurants just couldn't remain open because they just couldn't stay open, and so we missed out. No, I'm serious. Like I think the one true cultural export that the Chinese have given the world, far greater than kung fu or Eastern medicine, is Chinese food, and not just that, but the restaurant experience. Because I think that the Chinese have a variation of restaurant-style dining that every other culture has basically modified in some way to accommodate their cuisine or their cooking style technique. But the delivery itself, there's something about it, like multi-course, and they've been doing this stuff for a long fucking time. Like, not just like how do you feed a bunch of people, but how do you feed a bunch of people different things all at the same time. And that's some hardcore stuff. And there's like magic in a Chinese kitchen when you watch somebody working like 4 woks because they're a badass, and these flames are shooting out everywhere, and how the hell are they keeping this track in their head? But then all of a sudden it's like 6-7 minutes into it, and all of a sudden they're like dumping these things into something else, and then it's on a plate and ready to be served. And it's like no other like high cuisine does stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like they've got I mean, stir fry is like the most incredible, fast, and potentially healthy cooking style because you don't have to use a lot of oil. And if you use the right ingredients, then like the sauce comes out on its own.
Well, I don't think it's any coincidence that timing for fighting is one of the most crucial aspects.
Yeah.
Because you can't be a good fighter without having good timing. So, and then after watching all the Hell's Kitchen episodes, it's clear that timing is the most important. I mean, not the most, but one of the most important elements of cooking.
Yeah.
And
it all comes down to when you do things, recognizing when it's the right time. Like
timing
I have this thing with bacon where I listen for a certain range of sizzle, and if it's too fast, it's too hot. If it's not sizzling fast enough, it's too cold. And there's a range, but it's variable over the duration of the cook time because you start out with a bunch of fat on a piece of bacon and it slowly renders out. And as it renders out, you've got to alter your temperature. And so there's like this really incredible magic, especially to stir fry though, because that oil can get like 300 to 400 degrees, and that's hot. And if you can cook something with that like almost instantly, holy crap! I'm still learning. Someday I'll get this whole thing down. I'll be able to like whip out like legit, like truly Americanized Cantonese cuisine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding everything. The temperature that crepes cook at, everything else cooks at pretty well.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't burn.
Well, that's like a delicate pastry almost.
Yeah.
Like flash pastry.
Yeah, and mainly.
Or poof pastry.
You want to get the crisp without the carcinogens.
Yeah.
And that's that temperature when you don't have.
But you got to do it without using a lot of butter. Because if you have too much butter, then it does this completely other weird thing.
Yeah.
It like becomes a fried cookie.
There's like,
I've made
obviously
the fried
people
cookie
have
before.
digital dials, but when you don't have a digital dial on your stove, I marked it with a marker.
Yeah. Dude, people have made crepes on fucking like cast iron and wood stoves. I think it's possible to do it with any stove.
Oh, for sure.
So it's just like just a matter of
I don't think I don't think people are that meticulous about it when they make crepes in general, but I've been trying to find the best temperature at which to make crepes, and then what I've done is then cook other things at that temperature, and it makes it so that they don't burn, but you still get the crisp.
Yeah. I bet there's a industrial crepe machine out there.
Oh, probably.
That has they've industrialized it. There's probably an idealized thickness for the pan, and then they can inject or squirt out just like the optimal amount of butter, so that it dissipates from when they squirt out that blob of stuff, and then it has some like roller thing that smooths over, and then like it sits there for like however many seconds as they like heat up the pan with an induction coil, and then it like a thing scrapes it over, and when it does that, it pops onto a conveyor belt or it rolls it over something, and then they just like squirt the ingredients, and then it hits another roller and rolls it up for you. I bet there's a machine that does that.
I was gonna say, I think in last time I had one in France, they might have just had it straight on the grill.
Oh,
like a
cool.
big flat top grill, because it was a big ass crepe. But
well, that sounds like a pretty nice cafe. They got a flat top.
It was a like a stand.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like a
street
stand.
crepe?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I want street crepes.
Yeah, street crepes are fucking awesome, because then you can get all these different fillings in them.
Well, that's also like the most realist local cuisine. Because like that's what like the locals actually eat.
Yeah. Totally. Oh yeah, that's definitely some shit the locals actually eat. Because I always try to find that.
When my dad and I were walking around noodle places in Hong Kong, he would get weird stares, and I would just order stuff. And it was amazing. We went to like 3 noodle places in one day. We would walk until we had worked off the previous bowl of noodles and order another bowl of noodles, eat it, and keep walking until we ran out of steam. and luckily, every time that happened, there would be another noodle place ready to go.
That's whenever I go somewhere, I always look for the... it's like either the shawarma place where there's like brown people, or the fucking other place where the people match the food, because like, I always try to make sure the people match the food, man, because that's my general rule. If I go to fucking Vietnamese restaurant and it's Vietnamese people, I'm cool. But if it's like a Vietnamese restaurant and it's like a bunch of white people or something, I'm like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, it's like fucking, what is it?
And it's not to be racist. It's more so that's how you find out if the shit's authentic. It is a general
fucking
like that's just
Garden.
the way it is.
Like a fucking Olive
Right,
Garden.
yeah.
No, yeah. That's
And not to say that there should be at least a couple white people or brown people, like people that are not the same as the owners.
I want a diverse kitchen if it's going to be like a fusion restaurant.
Yeah.
If it's a fusion restaurant and it doesn't have a diverse kitchen, then it's not really fusion.
Right.
It's like, a cultural hybrid of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have like for a real fusion restaurant. I think a lot of them go into trendy stuff too easily.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are restaurants that try to cater to too broad of an audience when the reality is some chefs are really only good at a few things. Like, and I don't mean good, I mean like exceptional. Like they have their range of impression. Like, here, I'm gonna impress you with everything, Mr. President.
Yeah. That's one of the things I've noticed during Kitchen Nightmares. The bigger the menu, the more likely for it to be trash.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, if you have 50 items, how well are you doing all those items? Surely you're not doing all 50 items really well.
That takes an entire kitchen.
Absolutely.
That takes like multiple like sous chefs, like
McDonald's doesn't even do all this shit well.
Yeah, and they've got like several people in their kitchen actually doing things. They've got a person who's dedicated to the fryer, and multiple people dedicated to the fryers, I think, and multiple people on.
Because I mean, and even in the sense of their recipes are not the best. The childhood part of people and their nostalgia, like filet of fish. But in terms of the quality of the fish, the quality of the bread, there's a
it's
fish
extruded. That stuff is like extruded from a machine and then like stamp it off into shape. And
so my thing is, in terms of, let's keep it real. There's fish sandwiches out there that are gourmet that will blow your fucking mind. The fish fillet. No, it does not come anywhere near any of those things.
No, the fish fillet. I've seen. They are like poured out into trays. Mm-hmm. Then they're cooked and then cut and then they're battered and then they're cooked again. Like it's like.
Yeah, it's definitely not a fillet. It's a pseudo fillet.
Its origins in life are more similar to a fish puree jello. Fish puree jello. I'm serious. And then it's cut, and then breaded, and then they fry it, and then they flash freeze it, and then they have to. It's ready for refrying and refresh fry, and consumption. Industrial food is really, we want it to be good, but we also have to understand and accept that to get there, we're going to have to put up with a lot of really terrible examples. I mean, we will. We're only now getting close with like the Impossible burgers, and and it's close, but there's still the people, baby boomers probably who'll be like, they can smell the difference in a steak in the other room. Or a burger. They can feel it through the packaging without even seeing it. Like that's not real meat. And so we're gonna have a lot of failed attempts until it's 100%. And it may never be 100% 1-to-1. It might require several generations that have never had an all beef patty before it's accepted that the Impossible Burger is the real thing and the only thing. It might take several generations. It might not, because people might be more. They might be more interested in some something that doesn't involve eating an animal.
Yeah.
And I don't really care that there's there are some other costs involved, and that it might have a lot of sodium. We can get the sodium. We can get rid of the sodium.
Yeah.
We can do all this. If there's a beef patty out there that doesn't have a lot of sodium in it, well, we can engineer a fucking, Impossible patty that doesn't have a lot of sodium either. that tastes just as good. It has the right texture and consistency and doesn't feel like a Jell-O burger.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Because they taste really fucking good.
Yeah.
And they taste like an extra, like, select chunk of meat, but it still doesn't, it's not like having an actual big-ass hand-pattied burger that you can fire up on a grill. I think that's going to be the next frontier. So we're going to have to be able to buy them ourselves, and not in a tube, but like in an actual like package that looks like ground beef, so we can patty them up ourselves.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to be able to withstand the meatloaf test, because that's going to be the hard one. Because making a meatloaf isn't just, that's not a walk in the park.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody can like clump up a mass of beef and pork or turkey or whatever, and call it a meatloaf. But a really good meatloaf is way more than just a giant hamburger with a pre-seasoned hamburger.
Totally. Oh God, yeah.
So,
I mean, a good meatloaf has bread in it, but you still put it on bread.
And it has eggs, and onions, and peppers, and it has seasoning, and it has sometimes they have like pockets of flavor because it doesn't always get mixed in homogeneously.
Well, yeah, it just depends on who makes it.
Yeah.
I know sometimes the people leave the vegetable chunks in bigger.
Yeah. Like whole cloves of garlic to roast inside.
Yeah, my mom's are pretty homogeneous.
Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she uses onions, and I don't know if she uses peppers in hers, but it's never big chunks in it. Like I don't think she uses peppers in hers.
My dad went through a phase where he put like jalapenos in them.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were good. He was following this Paul Prudhomme recipe. That's the thing about, so anybody can compile a bunch of recipes and make a cookbook.
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite pastry cookbooks were always, people that looked like they ate a few too many cakes or pies.
Yeah.
And my favorite, like, food, like, cookbooks, like, you could tell, like, you can see it in someone's eyes whether or not they actually like to eat food.
Right, yeah.
And that's part of the reason that, like, a lot of these, like, TV chef experiences, I look at these people making this stuff, and they don't look like they're, like, excited to make it. And then the judges don't look like they're excited to be eating it. It's like, what can I gain from this other than this person doesn't even seem to be excited to get to do this?
Yeah.
And that's kind of discouraging. Like Martin Yan of Yan Can Cook. This dude is this Chinese TV cook who teaches people how to make Cantonese food. And he's like, can make whatever real fast. Because I think one of his skills is he's like super fast with a knife, and he can chop things up really fine, like julienne with just a blade.
Mm-hmm.
He makes it accessible, and he looks like he enjoys it, like he makes it fun.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I don't see a lot of. It's always this competition. It's not fun anymore. Cooking's supposed to be really fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of hobbies are, you said something on Facebook the other day about how, hobbies have to be monetized, but to be legitimized. And it's funny, but it's also kind of true. We've got this hyper competitive society that, you gotta make money doing it. You gotta sell everything. Everything has to be an advertisement for something else, it seems. And I don't think that that's how you get to like the highest level of anything.
Right.
I think that's like the wrong pursuit.
Yeah.
Because that's like the pursuit of competition and success through competition versus taking whatever it is and innovating it to the next evolution of what it could be, or combining it with technologies, or combining it with other ideas to make it, have an effective scope that is meaningful.
Yeah, and I think that constant need to find where you can put or pull profit from it and it does end up stifling a lot of progress in many fields.
Yeah.
And this is to me why the idea that it's being sold as what drives it is to me
the inherent flaw of the marketing in itself.
Yeah, and I don't think it's accidental, because what ends up being attributed to being a product of post-colonial capitalism is actually the product of science. You know, the fact that people's lives are extended, it's not because of post-colonial capitalism, it's because of scientific discoveries.
You know, I was reading about how you know, there's a lot of this latest economic boom is actually the end wake of the Obama economy in a lot of ways, and we're starting to see like the new economy start to work itself out with all these tariffs, and we're starting to see how it's really affecting things. And you know, so for a lot of time, people are saying, "Oh yeah, look at all of the tariffs aren't going to matter. Look at all the new businesses that are emerging." Well, you know, people start up new businesses when they lose their jobs. Or people start up new businesses because like it's finally time. They've been working toward this for a long fucking time, but the problem is that when we have like a material acquisition situation like we have right now, it doesn't actually allow a lot of businesses to develop in the way that they were able to develop a few years ago. I was just reading about how you know, China's like, we will agree to terms that aren't like, you know, accusing anyone of doing anything here. We're trying to create just like business agreements, like, and apparently, you know, the agreements that are being put forth are like essentially disable the kind of communication that creates innovation. It's like, no, we just want you to build stuff. It's like, well, we have to be able to understand what we're building so that we know if we're building it right.
Right.
Well, that's just obvious. And there's no way that we can expect the Chinese to build us technology without them understanding or even trying to use it.
Right.
I mean, really?
I mean, it doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah. And at this point, the only secrets are the kind that, like, really, those are things that shouldn't be happening, I feel like.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, oh, we've got a secret espionage, like fucking global espionage.
Exactly.
Web. It's like,
yeah,
well,
those are the only secrets left.
Yeah.
Those are the only secrets left, is the ones that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah. Like, if there's a medical breakthrough, that shit should be shared. If there's a scientific breakthrough, that shit should be shared. If there's a breakthrough in agriculture that allows for, like, higher crop yields with higher nutritional content, that shit definitely needs to be shared.
I mean, it's the same reason Elon Musk made the plans for his vehicles open source.
Exactly. Well, that's why we're about to see the emergence of several, like, you know, electric trucks and cars, or, like, Volkswagen's finally going to threaten... Hey, what's up, Bruce? You know, that's why we're actually finally going to see the payoff from all of that guy's, you know, I don't know what to call it, fishing with Washington, because, you know, we have to acknowledge that there's a, you know, the government helped. They have a vested interest in his success as well.
But then the people don't get profit from it, which is fucked. It's like,
I know.
You know, there was a lot of subsidy involved with the development of everything, and then
the only people that benefit are the people that are downstream in, you know, 20, 30 years, who are in a position to take advantage of the technology, or people who have enough money right now to take advantage of the technology and are able to manufacture or fabricate hardware.
Kind of, because the people who are doing it now are just they're the people who are paying to be the testing focus group. They're the paying.
That's right.
They're paying beta testers.
Yeah, they're alpha testers.
Really. Yeah, alpha testers, really. If we're gonna be real about it.
They're that's
Tesla is in its alpha.
Everyone,
really.
They're all in the alpha.
Yeah, they're all in the alpha. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But this is the problem with the current stage of investors, is that people have to do their alphas in the real world.
Yeah.
When alphas are supposed to be developed in sandboxes.
And I'm telling you, I drive a truck from 1995. I'm like all about some reliable, stable technology. With my vehicle, that thing starts every time. Yeah. No matter what the temperature. It can have been baking in the sun or been freezing for like, you know, almost a month, and it'll start. Well, it might not start if it was like freezing for 30 days, but
yeah, that's a big one.
That is.
That cold. That damn near always drains the battery.
But still, you know, like, I really want the electric car to work, but I also want the battery technology to not come at such a high environmental cost. Like, all that lithium is like basically the worst parts of strip mining.
Yeah, it was not good.
And yeah, just it's the worst parts of strip mining multiplied.
Yeah.
But when you know what, if there are high concentrations of lithium in a place, I wonder what kind of freaking advanced technological city was there at one point.
Yeah. Well, here's the issue. If our focus was on transportation and efficiency, then we wouldn't be trying to mine all the lithium. We would only be mining as much as we needed, instead of just trying to mine it all for the sake of maximizing profits. Because this is where it gets back to. We can't just do the technology for the sake of the technology. It has to be for the sake of profits.
Yeah. Well,
and again, this is where...
I understand why they do it all at once, because it's more efficient to do it all at once than it is.
Is it? We don't know that, because we've only been doing this for a very short period of time with certain elements. Because again, it's like, well, it may be better for the environment.
I mean, there's like a cost. There are diminishing returns to operating heavy equipment, because after a certain point of
which is why I'm saying maybe if they wouldn't necessarily have to do the heavy equipment if they weren't trying to take it all at once, and we're doing smaller mining operations so that it wasn't as damaging on the environment, so they have to bomb away the first, however many layers to get it all, and then all of, this is what I'm saying. The way that
they carpet bomb an entire city worth of space.
Exactly.
No, that's the thing that bothers me about the way that mining is conducted in general, is that like these are some strip mines out there are the size of entire cities, like capital cities. Like Indianapolis is, a pretty big city in terms of just area, but there are strip mines that are bigger than the city of Indianapolis, like expanding beyond even the ring of 465. And these are huge, colossal mines, and they go deep. That's why I think that there used to be a giant city there. That's why I think I'm serious. That's why that's the only thing that could explain why all of these things that we associate with modern technological societies are concentrated in these places. They
I don't think that's the only thing. I think accretion disks and elemental weights during formation makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, but they're concentrated in specific areas,
which is why the elemental weights would make that happen. If everything was in fucking red hot form 4 billion years ago, all of the same weight material would accumulate. I'm saying, because part of it is there's the idea and notion that some of our elements have come from asteroids, which would also explain why they're together. But then if we assume that all the elements were here from day one, then the reason they would be clumped together is because when they were all superheated, everything gravitated towards the same density layers. So that's what everything would be all together at first. All the iron would be all together. All the silver would be all together because it was all the same density and all the same temperature.
And they're not testing it for isotopes. So
right, exactly. So that's what I mean in the sense of, it doesn't have, I still think that the city hypothesis for explaining a lot, for the dispersed, because if there's nickel deposits on all these different pockets, to me that explains a lot of...
No, but that's the thing, is strip mines are almost always good for like a certain range of things. They almost all have copper and iron and
exactly.
and silver and nickel.
When all those things are together,
that's what I mean.
But then there's different pockets, and it's not all just one big strip mine. There's a bunch of different strip mines where, then that's where it is. That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. But even with that's why lithium to me is so intriguing. It's why is it really clumped into certain areas along with these other things? It's because there are certain areas parts of Scandinavia, now North Korea, that we've learned that are rich in lithium.
What happened?
What happened?
What the hell
why
happened?
are those places have such a tech rich requirement mineral? That's not just an advanced metal requirement. That's a super advanced metal. Because they wouldn't have been using that in medieval days. hey, check out my lithium sword. It's so soft I can bend it with my hands. Like,
I mean, okay, but what if? Okay, here's the opposite.
check out this lithium. If I grind it on itself, it starts to spark.
Here's the opposite. So this whole time, we've been. I mean, there's the Gaia hypothesis out there, but we've been misinterpreting technology in the sense of we're not looking at the world as a giant computer.
Yeah.
And it could have been a giant biocomputer, and we're
Fucking it up.
Holy yeah, we're
crap.
pulling it apart. Like we're destroying the motherboard to build shit on top of it.
Handheld computer, iPhones.
So yeah, that's kind of where again it's like, let's look at it from a different perspective. What if it is a giant cyborg? What if the whole reason we have this notion of cyborgs in fantasies because the planet is a gigantic cyborg?
And I've thought for quite a while that we don't even know how to pilot this spaceship, but there are people who are actively trying to disable or deactivate the life support system.
Yeah,
I've thought this for quite a while.
That's Scientology. That's like basically the story behind Scientology.
What, they were on a spaceship?
Not that we're on a spaceship, but that our souls were here, we were on a path to be ascendant, but then these other species came here and then started trapping our souls and started farming them, and then it basically took us off.
I mean, other humans are actively trying to turn off our life support systems.
But I'm saying this is like that. You remember that Battlefield Earth movie?
Oh God, I fell asleep. I couldn't even watch it.
That's based on the story of Scientology.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I mean in the sense of it is about Earth is like, it's not a ship. It's like a harvest place, but in the same way that if we I do have the notion of planets as well, whole solar systems as seeded ships from what we call the original Big Bang, if it was an actual sentient, active project that was created to put out life, that was seeding the universe. That to me makes more sense than aliens that go out on spaceships. You know what I mean? I think that the sentient life form would probably be a celestial sized being that we can't
comprehend.
Yeah, we can't comprehend as individuals can't. We can't, I can't sit there and talk to a celestial sized being because I'm a microscopic thing.
Our entire universe is contained within the little marble that is
exactly. From so I can't communicate with something that is. It would be let's say ants have mites. I can't see that mite that's crawling on the ant, and I can't communicate with that mite. But
even more than that, it's like we're not even the mites on the mites of the ants of this celestial being.
Exactly. Which gets into why this whole notion of
our entire universe exists within a droplet of water on the back of an ant, on the back of a mite, riding the ant that is in the backyard of the celestial being.
We have a hard time grasping how minuscule we are.
Yeah.
Because of how we still haven't really grasped how big the universe actually is. Yeah. So that makes us incapable of grasping how minuscule we actually are.
And like even the best physical analogies, like a grain of sand on a coastline of a beach, it's not even close. Because the relative proximity of all the grains of sand is it's still too dense. Yeah. It's still so dense.
And we have to give ourselves this grand celestial importance as individuals just to keep us moving to a certain degree. But the notion that thing would care about an individual is pretty ridiculous.
That's why
pretty absurd.
I think that's part of why we can't let go of the individual project.
Yeah.
We can't all just back something that's only going to benefit people 2 to 3 generations down.
Yeah.
Because we have to get the payoff too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's part of America.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, because then you realize the only way that it wouldn't have been possible. I assert and will say that it would not be possible to build the pyramids with slaves. There is nothing that we have done with slaves in any modern times that has compared to what the pyramids did, or what the pyramids are as a piece of architecture that is resistant to the elements and the shifting earth. And in all of these things, it is, I will say, it is almost 99.99% impossible to do something to that scale with slaves involved. You cannot have people under duress doing something like that.
There are stories about people, or about during the Great Wall's construction, about people getting built into the Great Wall.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't that they were like criminals or anything. The reality is that it was under construction, and a portion of the wall would collapse, and they would just be like, "Oh, well, let's just build over this."
Yeah.
We're not going to find
but
them. They're dead.
The story gets bastardized and disconnected.
It's like, and they say that they would put the captured Mongols. Mongols didn't get captured. Those motherfuckers were bad asses, and they fucking fucked people up. They were able to get around the wall. The wall didn't stop them.
Yeah.
The wall was to make the people feel safer. But
never heard that before.
Chang would get crushed inside the wall during construction. They're not digging his ass out. Let's just be realistic.
Right? Yeah. Of course not.
This is a big public works project. It's not. People had jobs building the wall. It was a concentrated effort to stimulate the economy. That's what all of these things really are. That's what the pyramids were. Let's stimulate the economy. Let's give everyone jobs. Let's make this place into a giant city. That's what it is. And it is a monument, but it's probably, there's potential for it to be all sorts of other really interesting things. But on a big macro perspective, it's a public work project. And it was successful. Yeah. Because that period of Egypt and the history of the world says that part of the world was extremely, they were doing just fine. It was the most beautiful part of the world at that point.
Yeah.
They had water everywhere. They could grow anything. People were doing pretty well. Slavery existed. That sucks. But I'm pretty sure, just like the rest of history.
Well, again, no. Chattel slavery didn't exist. Let's get that clear, because this is one of the things where, in that part of the world, when we're talking about, this is one of the big reasons that there's argument over Jewish history, because there's absolutely no proof that there was Jewish enslavement in Egypt at the time. This is one of the reasons as to why there's, debate over...
Yeah, but, I mean, I think slaves were, people that basically were, the house servant.
That's what I'm, and this is the difference between. This is what I'm saying. That's not chattel slavery. Well, that's not chattel slavery. So let's not say slavery existed in the same way. That's not the same slavery we're talking about when we're talking about American chattel slavery.
It's not American slavery.
And
but these people couldn't go out and get a job, though. That's the thing.
They didn't need a job, because what I'm saying is, when you're talking about slavery in the African context back then, they were the lowest person in the family.
Yeah.
They weren't property. They were little brother, little sister. They were the lowest. They were the person that had to wash the clothes. They had the person that had to prepare the meals. They still got to eat. They still got to eat at the table. It's not the same thing as you fucking stay in the shed with the pigs.
Yeah, no,
that's chattel slavery. And this is what I'm saying, in the sense of white people are trying to say that the Egyptian pyramids were built under chattel slavery, and they've been trying to frame it under that. And then there's a whole different aspect where Jewish people were claiming that they were the slaves that built it.
My concept of the slave for that era of time pretty much only applies to the wealthiest of people had slaves, and they weren't really slaves. They were they kept the house clean. They did the cooking. They took care of the people's children.
Yep.
They went to market for them,
So
and
those
they
things,
ran errands.
absolutely,
They were
yeah.
like administrative assistants.
Exactly, and that's a huge difference. That's a huge difference.
They didn't get a paycheck per se.
I mean, but they didn't need a paycheck. That's what I'm saying. They didn't need a paycheck.
They had housing, and they had food.
Exactly.
And they had
so why do you need it? Why do you need a paycheck if you have everything provided for you? So even in the story of like what was it? The technical Joseph, the one with the Technicolor Dreamcoat. That the whole.
Man, I'm really only aware of like Cats and Phantom of the Opera in terms of.
Well, the Broadway play is built around this dude's as a story, because what ends up happening is, this dude has 3 brothers who don't like him because he's a fortune he can read people's dreams. They sell him to the fucking pharaoh, and then the pharaoh, his life is like 10 times better living with the pharaoh than living with his brothers. Yeah. So that's where it was one of these examples of the story when they tell you, like, when you get sold into being like a servant of the pharaoh, a lot of times it was better than the shit you were coming from. So it's not the same.
That's the
so
thing,
this is what I'm saying in the sense of when they're talking about the stories of people who are quote unquote being sold into serving the pharaoh, it's not the same as being sold as chattel service in the American slavery context. And to use the slavery, and I'm not trying to chastise you, people conflate them on purpose to try to diminish what was happening there, to make it as if it was the same type of brutality and the same type of like treating slaves as if they weren't human. But it's not. It's absolutely not. And this is one of the things where the rhetoric was there for a reason, in the same way that there's still a shit. I mean, it's not that the South American tribes weren't doing ritual sacrifices, or they weren't doing blood sacrifices, but the way that the stories are presented and told and focused on is to diminish the accomplishments of those cultures and to make them into barbarians. Is one of these things that it makes it difficult to speak about, because again, when we're talking about people who were buried with libations, they were buried with sheep, they were buried with honorarium, like, how do you call those people slaves and use that same word with the Americans as slaves? It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's meant to be conflated to then be like, oh, these Egyptians, yeah, they built the pyramids, but they had slaves too. Because the same shit, they'll say the same shit about Athenians.
Yeah,
Athenians have slaves.
I feel like the way that
but it's not the same type of slavery. I feel like the type of
slavery that emerged with American conquest it sucks, man. It's like the kind of thing when, you know, what's that symbol that the Nazis like, that used to be used throughout like all of Buddhism? I can't remember.
The swastika?
The swastika, yeah. Well, that's like a symbol that's been found in like every culture on Earth, and I mean, usually typically it's associated with the sun, and now it's associated with Nazis. And there are a lot of things that have, and I'm not trying to say that slavery is ever a good word or a good thing. I don't think that people should be bought or sold, but I think that throughout history there have been different contextualizations of what it means to not be free, to not have freedom of choice over where one goes.
Person.
Yeah. And I think that we can't take that away from people who have been bought or sold, no, regardless of what era that they were bought or sold in, or whether they were mistreated or not, or because some slaves got to learn how to read, like straight up. Nobody got to learn how to read back then.
Right.
But some did.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. So it's tough because
then it's like, so for example, you have the Janissaries. They're a very hotly debated group because some will say they were taken from their families, and others will say their families voluntarily put them in, and some will say their families sold them, and some will say that their families were compensated, and it's like there's all these different versions of how it's told. So it's difficult to retrospectively look and see if the people were treated well or not. So that's why it's like, on the one hand, it's undebatable that these things happen, but then it is debatable whether their lives were better after or for it, or and I think it's not necessarily good to try to make a moral judgment call.
No, I think that they were all bought and sold, and that's a horrible atrocity. That's like,
in the sense
that's the dilemma, is that it only gets worse from there, really.
Yeah.
And it sucks because it, in a lot of ways, it prevents meaningful dialogue of reparations.
Yeah.
Because at some point, not everyone not everyone needs student loan forgiveness, because some people were able to break through, but they still had to go through school in a system that was built around predatory lending, and still put them into a position of like a competitive behavior that may have or may not have allowed them to achieve their potential. Whereas the system wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
And so there's always some kind of effect, and it's immeasurable. At least until we have real quantum computing.
Well, and then on top of that, how do you calculate inflation in that as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you what? And then what do you do about that? Do you take money out of circulation, or do you print more? Or what do you
Yeah, well, then you have the ripple effect.
Right. This is where, again, obviously this stuff's not happening in a vacuum, which then people will use that complexity to say, oh, well, then we can't do it. Like, no, that doesn't mean we can't
absolutely do it.
Like, because these things are complex questions that should not stop us from addressing them. It's just a matter of we have to look at all these complexities.
Exactly.
And it's just like they're talking about having the socioeconomic adversity score added to the SATs now. And it's like, oh, that's not going to turn out fucking horrible. Yeah, so then people are going to have their socioeconomic status weighed in as part of their SATs. So,
God.
Which, this is like, man, I get trying to balance things out, but when we all know everything's not balanced, we all know, okay, I don't think life will ever be fair. So anybody who's listening, life will never be fair. It's not that I think that life, quote unquote, should be fair. It's just that when we know that there's so many imbalances, we know that when people start out, the starting lines aren't even. We know where those things are.
Buddhism teaches that life is suffering. I mean, straight up. That's pretty much, we accept that.
It doesn't have to be. I don't think it has to be, in the sense of it's only suffering when you're doing it wrong. You know? And my thing is, you suffer and do things wrong to learn how to do things right. And if you're doing things right and still suffering, I don't think you're doing things right. So this is, to me, when we're talking, this gets back to the different epochs. Like, yeah, we're in an epoch of suffering because everybody's doing shit wrong.
Yeah.
Everybody's not doing anything right. So everybody's suffering most of the time. If most people were doing things right in their own bubble, most things would be pleasant. Most people would be happy. Then life wouldn't be suffering. Buddhism teaches life is suffering in this epoch, but it also teaches that it's not suffering in the fucking other epochs.
Well, yeah.
Like, it's mostly not suffering in those other epochs.
Taoism would say that the path to happiness is going along with the flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, if that's suffering, and you're on the path of least resistance, man, actually, that's really complicated.
Well, but no, it's not. It's not complicated, and it works because this gets back to the whole reason that people who suffered through slavery are here, and the ones who didn't suffer through aren't here. Like, at some point, suffering is the only path, versus the other path being death. In some extreme cases. So it's not that. Yeah, there are cases where the path of least resistance is to suffer instead of to die.
Throw my body over the side of a boat just like my ancestors.
Yeah, exactly. That's when he did not choose the suffering as the path of least resistance. Yeah. That's why I'm like, I can tell you it's like black and white. That's perfect, you know.
Yeah.
But again, this is where
we'd like to thank the writers of Black Panther for supplying us with that. That movie was actually probably one of the best in the entire series. So,
well,
also just saying that.
It's definitely opened up the conversation about colonialism in a way that it didn't happen before. Because in the same way that we're discussing...
Man, and then the new Ragnarok is just some part of Scandinavia on Earth. Or nothing, the new Asgard.
Yeah, basically.
They just moved into Sweden.
And then, of course, the dude who not necessarily got us there hands it over to a woman. It's like, now you take care of it. You fix it.
Yeah, right. Okay. He's all fat and overweight now and just getting out of depression. He's going to go running around in the universe with the boys.
And then try to usurp another male's authority.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, it's like Asgardians of the Galaxy. That's what he called it. He's like he was joking about it. You know, the Asgardians of the Galaxy.
That's funny.
And Rocket's like all about it because between him and Thor, it's like he has like a new best friend that he can that can actually take all of the beatings.
Yeah.
And he calls him Rabbit. Yeah, but you're right though. He does. Like they move into like Scandinavia, set up shop, and then after he goes and has a big win with all of his buddies, like at the local sports game, hands it off to his girlfriend. He's like, "Here, you take care of the place. I'm gonna go hang out with my new best friends, and we're gonna go traipse around the galaxy." Oh, never mind this incredibly powerful blonde over here, Captain Marvel. Who...
Well, okay. So what I was getting at with Black Panther is Black Panther represents on screen a African nation that has never been colonized.
Yeah,
we don't see that in media. I think the Shaka Zulu is probably damn near the closest thing.
Yeah, and they die.
And they lose.
They were slaughtered.
They lose like big time. So when it comes to like Black Panther is the antithesis of Shaka Zulu concerning the end, but it also gets into portraying the black man in the same like style of strength as that movie. Now, what I was getting at with, we've never seen anything. Now, imagine like Woman Panther with all of the like.
Ooh, some like divine tigress.
I mean, in the sense of when you had Wonder Woman, they were the Amazonians, and they had their own island. But the film ends...
hiding. They were in hiding. They had to go into hiding because they were going to be destroyed by the world of men.
The film ends with Diana wanting to assimilate into patriarchy.
Yeah.
The fucking film ends with Diana wanting to assimilate into patriarchy. So this is kind of where, to me, there is a sense of when Black Panther at the end of...
But then she ends up dating Bruce Wayne, who's like...
That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
she it gets even worse. Well, and not to mention the whole character was created by
she assimilates to the patriarchy and then is attracted to like the most powerful sociopath on earth.
Yeah, the character was created by a dude who wanted to give tribute to his mistress, I believe. And his wife at the same time. So he gave her elements of both his wife and his mistress. But also brought in elements of S&M because that's what he was into. So the whole thing was a male sex fantasy that was created. Like, that's why I have mixed feelings about the Wonder Woman character in the first place.
That's actually the problem I have with most anime is the hypersexualization of women, and like they always have to rely on a big gun.
Mm-hmm.
Not always. Like sometimes it's like Major Kusanagi who has like the most advanced cyborg martial arts program and uses like whatever robot kung fu to kick ass.
Yeah.
But eventually she still relies on a big gun, or they use some cyber attack, and that's basically like a knife to the back of whatever they're going after. And so even in examples like that where we have strong women they still have to rely on technology or a big weapon. And I think even in a lot of like the Chinese Chinese stories where they've got powerful women, they still have some dude with a sword, like doling out their punishment, or maybe it's not a sword, maybe it's a gun, maybe it's a more modern sword, but there's always a man at the end holding the weapon covered in blood.
That was Dynasty Warriors, as a video game series, and obviously Romance of the Three Kingdoms as the book lore that from which it was drawn, were good about having females that didn't rely on men to defend them, and the women in that series were all powerful as shit and didn't, they wielded their own weapons.
So it's interesting. What's interesting about the Three Kingdoms is that's the span of 2020 AD through 280 AD. I got a little handy dynastic calendar or chronology of China here. I got this in Hong Kong. But that's after the Han Dynasty. And so that's right around when, and it's also, let's see, it's before, it's like 600, 700 years before the Song Dynasty. They would have had some pretty crazy armor around those times. Like I remember seeing armor of a variety of sizes when I was in China. Like especially like in Beijing, they had there's all sorts of stuff on display, but they had armor of every size. Yeah. Like women and men.
And then they got giant stuff, which I've seen some
like giant hammers and shit.
Yeah, there's a sword I saw in a museum in Turkey. That it must have been 12 or 14 feet long,
and it has a handle that's like 3 feet long.
Right? Yeah, because then you're like, who the fuck?
A 12-foot dude.
I mean,
a 12-foot fucking dude is the person who used that sword.
Yeah.
And that guy had armor. And he probably rode a fucking elephant. Yeah. Because what else would something that big ride?
Yeah, man. And that's when you see these weapons, and you're like, what the fuck kind of human? And this is, again, different epochs.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, like, we know around that time that there was some pretty crazy shit going on in, I guess, the Middle East. We know that Persia was pretty fucking crazy around then, too. Yeah. The Silk Road was just starting to get that far west. And so, they had access to all manner of weapons and new diets. And I bet there was all sorts of, like, for the time would have been like nutritional, not just supplements, but nutritional mega foods.
Well, that's when they were doing the proto-alchemy and shit, too. Yeah. Trying to find the elixir of life.
Yeah. So there would have been people out there who had access to like the absolute like pinnacle of nutrition. Yeah. And not just that, but physical training, because that's, around the time that all these things start to emerge, and all these crazy fighting styles. What always amazed me about development of fighting styles is that there's a period of time I don't even think it's like the barbarian phase, but there's a period of time when the weapons were all about close combat, and like there were fighting styles that don't exist anymore because they rely on these really vicious weapons, and then we get into like gladiator style fighting styles, and that's a completely different style of combat. Like,
yeah, man, these different epochs of
and then they all have their own types of armor, and I think in Asia, women fight a lot more than we know about.
Well, because there was some emperor that had all female guards at one point, and that was like a while back. I think it was.
I think that's happened several times in like China or even Japan, like probably in Thailand. I bet it's happened all over the place.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
fucking, what's his name? Muammar Gaddafi had all of his bodyguards were female, but he also made them wear ridiculously colored outfits.
But he did too.
Yeah, man, he was like Prince is to like funk and soul. That's what Muammar Gaddafi was to like autocratic despots. He was like the most pimpinest autocratic despot there was. Yeah. Like gold.
He's a weird one, man.
I know, gold all over the place and shit.
Because it's like there was so much misinformation out there about him. And then
didn't the United States put him into power essentially?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say in the sense of for someone we effectively put into power, who then use that to
do exactly what they're supposed to do with that power.
Right. Yeah. the Green Book is pretty insane, and I'm not gonna say that there's not African people out there who hate him, because I'm sure there are. But in my experience, anytime I talk to an African person, they're so like, I miss that man. It's the craziest reaction. Like the fact that we killed that dude as America, and
then let him be just dragged through the street like that.
And then his country just fall into slavery, and then we're like, okay, move on. Let's go fight Iran now.
I'm actually surprised that it took as long as it did to get into Iran.
We're not going to Iran.
I know.
We're not going to Iran. They're
just putting troops back in
They're
Iraq.
just saying this shit to probably move a budget around, to get some shit in the black budget that they're doing.
Well,
we're not going into
even
Iran.
If they don't, I'm surprised it took this long.
Well, because okay,
I thought they'd have done it sooner.
Have you seen what the Iranian leaders are saying?
Oh God!
They're
we
coming
out. We could destroy your fleet with one missile.
I mean, they're saying we're practicing, and you don't see this in the Western media. I had to go fucking look at Al Jazeera, because I was like, why am I not seeing the Iranian, like, what they're actually saying for us to be talking about them going to war with them right now? Because like, you keep in America, anybody who's listening in America, you keep hearing stuff about the response to Iran, but you never actually hear what the fuck Iran said in the first place. And when you go look for it, their quote-unquote response to what we're saying is, we're trying to practice restraint, and if the Americans initiate an attack, it will not be pretty for them. Because it won't. It won't. We can't.
Oh, God, no.
That area...
We would level Iran, like, really pretty quickly.
No, we wouldn't. No, we wouldn't. So? No, fuck no. Are you? No.
We've been moving our battle groups around there, haven't we?
No. The problem is the terrain makes it impossible to execute a fucking ground attack. The same reason we can't win in Afghanistan, the same reason we're in there 15 years later, is the same reason we can't just waltz into Iran and level them. It's a military fortress dream of a landscape. You can't go in there on the ground.
No, I mean, the only way to go in is to launch cruise missiles, right?
And we can't do that because they'll fucking shoot them out of the sky. So it's a quagmire. It's a military quagmire. We can't win, and it's just going to be fought to a draw, just like Afghanistan. Because the problem with Afghanistan is there's so many mountains and so many caves that if you fucking trap them in one area, they just scramble to another. Exactly. Yeah. You can't fucking corner anybody in these areas, so you can't strategically trap anyone in either of these regions. Therefore, you can't win a military incursion. Yeah. That's why they've been able to establish these empires and keep them there. And the problem is, Americans are not taught enough history, enough military history, to know why these regions are still controlled by the entities that control them. And then when they're shown military shit like Transformers, there is an idea of how quick our military response is. No, don't get me wrong. Our military response is quick as shit. Our military could have a missile probably on anywhere on the face of the planet within minutes if they wanted to. That's not the issue. The issue is a long-term military incursion. Yeah. That's not gonna fucking happen. And the main problem is...
I think that the only way to assault Iran is to literally just launch everything at them, and then
you can't do that.
No,
exactly.
You can't.
So,
you just can't.
And this is
that's
why they've been trying to find nukes.
Yeah,
that's the reason. As soon as they find one nuke that gives the United States the excuse, exactly. That's why they've been searching.
That's what I mean. It's like that's the only way it works is they have to level Iran. That's the only way that they can end this. And then once they do that, then America is the country that levels.
So here's the thing. So with a nuclear warhead, it can be activated, but it's not going, like, if you shoot it out of the sky, it's not going to, like, explode the way it would as if the...
Oh, no, they have the very specialized detonation.
Right.
Like,
so what I'm saying is, say, like, you launch all the nukes. Let's say we launch 26,000 nukes at Iran all at once.
And so they launch everything they have to try to intercept this, and they only intercept, like, let's say they intercept 85%.
Right.
Let's just make it easy. Let's say we only have 10,000, and they knock out 85%. So we only have 1,500 nukes that are still going to land somewhere within the land space of Iraq.
Right.
And not all of them are going to detonate, because some of them are they're going to have radio interruption, and they're not going to be able to trigger on.
Still not going to wipe out the whole country.
It's still not going to wipe out the whole country.
Still not going to wipe out the whole country.
But it's going to create this horrible cloud that's going to affect the entire world for the next 40 years.
What do we want there anymore?
Exactly? We just glassed it, and so there's nothing left. The oil isn't useful anymore because we fucked it.
Whoops.
All of that amazing farmland that was producing the world's finest Shiraz grapes are gone.
Whoops.
The culture is gone.
Whoops.
We've destroyed all relations with the neighboring cultures or countries because we've just irradiated, like, their borders.
It's really starting to sound like this plan.
Oh, this is a terrible idea.
It's a fucking horrible plan.
And so, like, when they say that, like, all it's going to take is one missile, they're actually right. It only takes one missile, and it's not from them, it's actually from us. It only takes one missile from us, and then the United States becomes, like, we're the worst at that point.
We lose.
Yeah,
the first missile we fire, we lose.
Oh God! Even that, but like even if we don't fire it,
what's Putin saying right now?
Oh God!
What's Putin saying right now?
I bet he's laughing his ass off.
He's just waiting for us to fire that first missile. Because as soon as we fire that first missile, he all of a sudden becomes the world's most moral, fucking superpower leader.
I think China still has the edge on him.
I mean,
even though they're it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. But then it becomes a race between those two. Yeah, which sounds fucking crazy.
Oh yeah, no. Who do you want to win in a race between Russia and China?
Yeah. That's what happens as soon as we fire that missile, which is why it's so important to get control of the American system. Like, we can't let the left wing or the right wing tell us who our leader's going to be anymore, because they're just giving us status quo. Every single fucking, I mean, I won't say Andrew Yang is status quo, but pretty much everybody else.
You know, it's funny about Andrew Yang is, like, I was interested when he first appeared, but I can't think of anything about his platform right now. Anything. It's a blank.
He's got universal basic income. That's his main thing that he's pushing.
Yeah, but I don't think that American society is ready for that.
I mean,
we can't even handle universal health care.
No, of course. So
UBI is like that's a pipe dream right now.
Yeah.
Right now. I mean, that's just me being kind of pragmatic about it.
No, for sure. And that's the problem is, like, you know, it's the devil.
I want universal basic income. I think that it's great. I think that we should have, like, some kind of socialized everything.
But this is the problem with having
we can't do it.
Uneducated, uninformed people making decisions about their children's futures.
Or maybe they're extremely educated and they just want all the money siphoned into their pockets.
Right.
I mean, that's the other,
I wouldn't say those people are educated. I say they're greedy. Because what I find is the most educated people aren't the most rich or greedy most of the time, because that's why Tesla ended up fucking broke.
Yeah, sometimes they're just extremely creative, and they are willing
willing to exploit.
Willing to take risks.
Like, I don't even think it has anything to do with taking risks. I think it has 100% to do with exploitation, because the problem is the people who take risks and don't exploit don't end up with the extreme disparities. Because it's like,
I think that's part of the I think it's like a subliminal. Everything that I've just said, you also just have to add while exploiting. You know, that's the thing.
True.
There's creativity while exploiting.
But here I'll give you an example. Nipsey Hussle is the creativity without exploiting, while also monetizing.
Yeah.
With the risk, because the issue is that a lot of people are saying the reason he got shot is because he took a risk in staying in the hood to keep his business there. But that was the risk.
Yeah, but that's how he maintained
exactly
the economic flow of that community. Like
that risk that got him killed.
You can't take the money out of the community.
Is the risk that got the community booming.
Yeah.
So again, this is where, but he wasn't exploiting it,
Yeah.
so he wasn't a billionaire. He could have been a fucking billionaire if he would have exploited black people in that situation the way he could have. If he would have been back pocket fucking investing in private prisons and then in the hood pretending to be helping people but then fucking rolling on people, that's the dude that becomes a billionaire. That's the dude that becomes a billionaire. Not Nipsey Hussle.
For a second,
you see what I'm saying?
For a brief
saying?
second, in my mind, you started describing Suge Knight to me.
That's the dude.
Yeah,
that's Suge Knight.
Yeah,
that's Tekashi.
Tekashi.
That's
okay.
Tekashi.
Well, that's because he's a snitch.
Tekashi would have became a billionaire if his ass wouldn't have got caught.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
No, exactly. Yeah.
Tekashi became a millionaire in a year.
Yeah. It was actually quite incredible. I remember reading this
because he was willing to exploit. He was the motherfucker selling drugs and fucking telling to the cops.
Yeah.
That's the fucking motherfucker that becomes the billionaire. Because he's willing to exploit both sides. It's the gross.
Yeah, but that's like in the grand tradition of mob bosses who are also FBI informants.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying, bro.
Those
are the ones that became the fucking billionaires and passed that shit on to their kids.
I mean,
it's a whole different
similar
level of exploitation.
It's a similar.
It's not good.
There's a corollary with the CIA and Manuel Noriega, or CIA and Saddam.
Now you see it. Now you see what I'm talking about. These big ass crime bosses.
Like this is all just it's just a variation of municipality, locality versus region versus state versus interstate. or
it's all just big fucking mafias, man. Because when you start, because this is like I went to The Economist had a summit. Like The Economist magazine.
Got all those fucking Xanax
and it was
rappers,
about well, who's paying their bills?
Yeah,
we need to check
fucking Eli Lilly.
Exactly. Now you're getting it. Now you're getting it, bro.
That's the thing. Like whenever I see that stuff, like I half my brain is like, this is the weirdest commercial for something that I'm not sure if I'm even gonna ever.
Native advertising.
Yeah, right.
Native
it's
advertising.
The weirdest fucking marketing.
And then you go back and look at the history of rap music. Rap music didn't used to talk about pills. Rap music used to talk about fucking Xanax and barbiturates and.
No, but if it did, it was because somebody died.
It didn't even talk about that shit, man. I'm telling you, you can go back and look. Before Eminem, rap was not talking about pills. It was like pills were not a thing in the hip hop community because they were not what black people took.
Yeah.
Like black people didn't take Quaaludes.
No.
That was not a thing in the black.
That's a yuppie thing.
So what I'm saying is you can go back and listen to you can do a data analysis and track the actual words being used, and you will see when pills start becoming part of the rap lexicon. It's the late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And then now,
I know that it wasn't Eminem wasn't the first person.
No, he
to
wasn't
talk
the
about
first.
Pills.
No,
he was just
he was the one that made it big.
Yeah, well, he had a Pills song.
Yeah, exactly.
That Purple Pill song.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, who was it? No, maybe it wasn't.
Like, rappers weren't talking about no fucking ecstasy. Rappers weren't talking about lean. Lean wasn't a thing.
They were, it was in the early...
DJ Screw, I can tell you.
Screwed.
Yeah, DJ Screw was the first person to really make lean a thing, because then they started calling it scissor and purple drank, and it was all that other shit before lean. And it was like, now it is all these songs are basically just commercials for pharmaceutical industry.
So, I think we've got to cut it a little short. So.
No, it's all good. We went
2 hours, 3 hours. Hey, thank you all for listening. Come back and come check us next week.